Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the Tetracast. This is RPG Site's weekly podcast where we get the site staff together to talk about our favorite genre of video games. It is the last recording we have in February. We're going to be spending a lot of time talking about Octopath Traveler 2 today. In order to talk about this game, we've brought on a larger cast than normal for this discussion. I'm your host. My name is Brian Vitale. Let me go through who's all here with me today. We have the usual crew. We have Josh Torres.
Hi. Hello.
We have Adam Vitale.
Hello.
James Galizio.
Hey, folks.
Chao Minwoo.
How's it going?
And joining us, we have Colin Black.
I guess the real Redemption Reavers were the friends we made along the way.
And we have Quentin O'Connor.
Hello.
So, yep, we haven't heard from Cullen in a while, and I'm not sure we've had Quentin on a regular episode of our podcast yet. Refresh my memory if you have been, but I'm blanking. But regardless, it's good to have you both on because both of you have had access to Octopath Traveler 2, and you're here to join us on our discussion of that today. It's not the only new release for this week, but it's probably the headliner. So remind me, Cullen, you covered Octopath Traveler 2 and wrote up the review for RPG Site, which is up on the site now. Is that correct?
I did, yes.
And then Quentin, did you cover it for another outlet, or were you doing guides for another outlet?
Yeah, I'm doing guides for the main place that I work, The Gamer, but I also wrote a review for it over at Nova Crystallis.
No, that's really neat. So yeah, and I do know that I have been able to put just about 2 hours into it. I saw Chow was playing it late into the evening last night. I think James might. I think James. Hey, Discord was telling me that you were playing Octopath, or at least were idling in it. And then I think James has started it as well. So some of us, are just playing the release version as it came out. At the time of recording, we're recording this on Saturday. It just came out yesterday, officially. And so some of us are a couple hours in. Some of us have, of course, beaten the game. So we'll have a discussion from all those perspectives as we go into the podcast's main body here right now.
Yeah, I think Adam and I are the only ones who haven't launched the game. Maybe I have it in my Steam library, and I'll get around to it eventually. But it is there.
Well, I remember I downloaded the demo because I wanted to get that 3-hour head start, and then I just never got around to it. I'm like, I guess I'll delete the demo and just get the full thing now.
Yeah, because, that's my demo. That's my demo philosophy these days. At this point, with the whole long demo, it's I could maybe start that, but I already have it pre-ordered on Steam, so I guess there's not really a point to starting it.
Oh, this is why I don't play demos, because you'll never play it.
Because when I get the full game, I just replay it from the start anyway, so my flow isn't messed up. So yeah,
yeah, I dig that. I feel that a lot.
Wasn't there they mentioned something about the Steam demo where the saves don't transfer over or some crap? Or is that
there was an issue with because of the way the Steam Deck works? It doesn't. If you played the demo exclusively on Steam Deck, you can't exactly transfer it over without messing with settings.
Did they mention that pre-release at all, or did people have to find out on release day?
People had to find out on release day.
Fucking hell, of course.
This is why you don't play demos.
That's why you don't ever get a Steam Deck. Don't play shit on Steam Deck.
That's true.
All right. To kick off the discussion here, so we have a handful of us, everyone here except Josh and Adam, playing or having already played Octopath Traveler 2. Has anyone here who is playing Octopath Traveler 2 not played the initial game, the original one?
Played the original game, but didn't beat it.
You see, yeah, so I'm in a similar boat where I only played 5 hours of the original game.
Okay. And then, go ahead, Colin.
I was just going to say, just kind of leading into my general thoughts about 2, the way I know 2 was better is that in Octopath 1, I only got 3 characters. In Octopath 2, I got all the characters.
I'm so jealous of both of you who were who played the first one and didn't beat it, and then got into this one and was enjoyed it a lot more. So you didn't have to go through hours of the first one to or even remember the first one that much. Because personally, people know this about me already, and people have read my review of the first one on the site know that I was generous with it, because it was very novel type of the itchy 2D visual style, but for me personally, there were a lot of flaws about it. I was okay, there's a starting point here. It's clearly flawed, but because of the novel concept of the visuals, I'm willing to kind of be okay with that. Because for me, it was more of a prototype more than anything. So I'm really looking forward to this one. I mentioned it at when they first showed. It's I really hope the sequel is a lot better than the first one, because there are sparks of a good game to me in the first one, but it was just never fully realized.
And then Adam, you have also played the first one, is that correct?
Yep.
All right, so we've all played at least up to 3 characters in the first one, and then 5 of the 7 of us have at least started the second one. So carrying the discussion here at the start are going to be Cullen and Quentin, who have you both seen credits beaten the game?
Yes.
All right, so you'll be carrying the load of the discussion, and obviously the rest of us will chime in with our comparisons to the first game or as what we've experienced so far, having started the second game. Since Cullen was the one that wrote the review for RPG site, I'll start out with him. So obviously, Cullen, you've kind of already given the apparent summary is that when you went to play the first game, it didn't hold your attention. That doesn't seem to be the case for the second game. So I guess I'll just say that the stage is yours. You've played this game to completion. You've written the review on the site. Yeah, so what does Octopath Traveler 2 do that made you score it higher than the first and hold your attention and make you want to come and discuss on it on this podcast here?
So the thing about Octopath 2 that's really interesting to me is that on paper, it doesn't do a lot different than the first game. So, and this is one thing I will admit I kind of struggled with in conveying in my review, because everything it does is pretty much, in my opinion, it's like what Octopath 1 tried to do, but better. Like, it's a lot of small details put in here and there to make the overall experience just a bit more cohesive and like gripping, I think. They didn't budge on the formula. They just made it more engaging in a lot of small ways. If it's from like the writing of the stories is a bit cleaner, a couple gameplay tweaks. I was reading like what some friends were saying. I think like maybe it's the limit break system. I forget what the name
latent
of
powers. Is that what you're talking about?
I think so.
Where
The latent powers are new, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not in the original.
So it's like little, like they took a bunch of feedback, and all of the changes for Octopath 2 from what I've heard, are little things. Things that where it's like by itself would be like, oh, that's neat. But there's so many little changes and fixes that it just feels like if you didn't like Octopath 1, I'm not going to guarantee that you'll love Octopath 2, but there's a higher chance that you will, because it's a lot easier to see what the Octopath vision is, for lack of a better term.
So yeah, like I think it's a really fair assessment. Like I think that's like a really good point that you make. That like, hey, just because like they did, like you said, they didn't budge on the formula. I'm gonna assume that, you still have their standard. Like, hey, here are 8 characters. You choose their path. They all have like their own sort of story going on. I guess we'll talk about story flow later for these characters, because that's one of the things I've heard that they really kind of like improved upon in this game for each of them. But like, I do like that you mentioned that, like, hey, just because, there's a lot of praise for it doesn't mean that, like, you're guaranteed to like it if you dislike the first one. Like, I think people are very honest when they say, hey, this isn't going to, like, change your opinion entirely if you just dislike the first one, like, wholeheartedly. Like, for me, like, I'm going into it with an open mind. Like I said, like, there's a lot of things I dislike for the first one, but I'm willing to, like, give this a chance and see if I like it, because like, even games that I dislike, I'm still willing to like give them a shot and see it in the completion and see like what was like the vision that they were going for, because like I'm going into this game not only just having played the first one, I played like a good chunk of the mobile game as well, and I can see the little steps that they've taken, not just from the first game to the second game, but like from the first game to the mobile game to this game, and like what sorts of lessons from that, like a lot of the writing chops like that they kind of built up from the first game to this second game, like they kind of learned along the way throughout years with the mobile game. And like, I think the mobile game really stepped it up, not in terms of like structure and also story flow in that game as well, and making sure that like it's varied, it's engaging, it's not as like somewhat shallow like in the first one, because the first one had a very, very, very rigid structure of like, hey, you're in this new chapter. You're kind of presented with like the broadly the main conflict of this chapter, whether it's like a person of interest or like here's this certain scenario of like this person of interest oppressing something or someone or some societal body. You do some sort of like investigative action like phase in that chapter, and then after that investigative phase with like the unique talent that you have, so you interact with the townsfolk in that town. Then you get into a transition state of like going to like the quote unquote main dungeon of that chapter into boss, and then done, and then next chapter, whether it's a new character or you continue with that character, and it's basically the same narrative
repeat
flow.
8 times.
Yeah,
repeat 4 times across 8 characters.
yeah, and
They
I do-
definitely
Go ahead, Colin.
sorry.
go for it.
They
Go for it,
definitely mix that up a lot more.
Mhm.
Like I think one of the standouts for me was there's a chapter with Agni. Is it Agni? I forget the pronunciation
Agnia?
already.
Is it the-
Yeah, with the dancer, yes. Where like you go through a whole chapter with, to my knowledge, like no combat and no boss, and you're just making a group of friends
That's awesome.
and helping
good.
them out with a little like performance they put on,
Mhm.
and then you leave.
Cool.
Like it
Hell
just it makes, like, especially for this dancer, which I like the contrast between this game's dancer and Octopath 1's dancer, where it feels like this is a character who could totally have little like fun side, like it's a main story quest, but like not everything about her journey needs to be grim dark.
Mhm.
The game, honestly, everybody else is kind of like doing that as is. So
that reminds me of like I forgot the merchant's name in Octopath 1, but like she's a very cheerful
Ryza.
girl, but she always had to have like a boss in every one of her chapters because I don't know, because
It's an
it's part of the structure.
Well, the format that Josh was talking about, not only is it rigid mechanically, but it's rigid narratively, because you have to have every story arc has to be cleanly divided into 4 parts. Every part has to have some goon or antagonist or something that you have combat against, culminating in a boss.
Colin, I'll get into common ground with you there because I know what you've been consuming in terms of like lately in terms of media, like like the original Gundam, like 007. I forgot. In fact, I forgot if you watched like the TV series or the movies.
I watched the movie.
Okay, the TV series was very Monster of the Week in that show, where like every single episode needed to have like some sort of showdown, because of course they were selling robots.
Zeta was the same way.
Yeah.
So I did get that experience. Like I watched the movies, which I'm going to go back and watch the shows at some point. And for those who, we are talking about the original Gundam 0079. But yes, so the movie trilogy was I think a cleaner way for a newcomer to get into those. And then I proceeded to get that experience anyway with Ideon and then Zeta, which were the 2 things that the creator of Gundam worked on after that, where it is every episode is, even if it doesn't make sense, we have to have a conflict. So there's a new cool robot so we could sell people toys. And honestly, I think that hurts. I'm not going to talk about this too much. You got me going on Gundam. I think between the last episode I joined and this episode, I've just become a huge Gundam head. It's bad.
You'll love to see it.
We talked about the 00 movie last time you were on, I think.
I remember the
Did I?
Ideon series. I remember there's this one episode that was very stupid. They were like trying to surrender, so they put a white flag into their base. And they're like, you know what the white flag means? It means you want to fucking genocide them or some shit.
Yeah,
Like,
it's a declaration of war.
to get rid of the flag.
Anyways, I do want to loop Quinton to get their thoughts on the game as well, because they've obviously played through it for their review and guide work on the other outlets. So, Quinton, I don't know if you felt similarly to Colin and Josh about the first game and how it compares to the second game. So, just what are your thoughts on Octopath Traveler 2 at a high level?
Yeah, it's interesting. I would say that Octopath Traveler 2 retroactively makes me like the first game a little less.
That's interesting. Okay.
Because, it's not that I was blind to its flaws. It was more that I think like a lot of folks, just kind of entranced with the visuals, with the audio, with just, it's
totally understandable why people love that game, like especially on like a presentation side. Like it was one of the best OSTs of that year, easily, Yeah,
exactly. And it was just so novel that going into this one and then kind of seeing what that team can do, obviously, with your knowledge in mind, Josh, about how the mobile game has really stepped that team up to the plate and brought all these things in. But from, I guess, my perspective as someone who hasn't played the mobile game so much, or just like seems like out of the blue all of a sudden, the writing's crisper. There's a lot less repetition involved, even though if I'm to like really zoom out and think, okay, can I still say that the core loop is the same between the first and the second games? It's kind of like what Cullen said, like these incremental improvements that just add up and add up and add up, because in a sense, I sort of can. And so that's why the whole time I was playing, I was like, I know that I like this more than the first game. I'm curious to see if people who didn't really care for the first game are actually going to be on board with with this one, because I still see so much of the DNA of the first game. It's just, again, like you said, Colin, it's everything has stepped, 1, 2, 3 stages or whatever.
There are a lot of small things you just wouldn't
Yeah.
notice. It's so hard to describe to someone unless you really get deep into systems and like spend a lot of time breaking down every single thing that would change and all the numbers. But that's not really the kind of guy I am. So I look at this and I just go, oh, it's better.
Yeah, like at the end of the day, like, especially with reviews, like it's really how you feel about it as a whole. You don't have to like break down every single like system, subsystem, every single little like detailed thing to like be like, okay, this is exactly why I like or dislike it and why you should like or dislike it too. It's like, it's really just, all about vibes, like really all about how does it make you. You don't have to be like super like deep into like why it makes you feel that way. It's just like, I don't know, it just feels good, man. Like,
Yeah.
I think the best way to describe it, it's like Mega Man sequels. It's like, why is Mega Man 2 so much better than Mega Man 1? People always say Mega Man 1's a trash tier game, but Mega Man 2 is like the god tier game. It's like, gameplay wise, it's not much different.
Yeah, exactly. But like when you like get your hands on the controller and you start like controlling Mega Man and you start platforming, you see like level design. It's like, those aren't things that like really go through your head as like you're playing. You're just like, this just feels somehow better to play, and you can't really pin it on why. But once you really take down, like if you really want to do the math of like sitting down for hours, like, okay, the level design was better in this aspect. The bosses were like more well-rounded in this aspect. It's really the path of like the logic in between bosses, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, yeah, you could do that, but it's way easier to say it was just fucking better, dude.
So what I'm hearing is that Octopath Traveler 2 is the Mega Man 2 of JRPGs.
Ooh.
I mean, it could
I have
be.
a question.
Go that far.
Yeah, maybe.
You were talking earlier about like the structure. So one thing about the original game, its structure and its formulaic kind of approach to it, you were talking about how kind of all the flow between every story was about this pretty much the same. So a very common element of the original game was like you'd go to a town, and there was a lot of towns, and they basically all looked the same. And you like kind of like the intro to their chapter of the story, and then you would go to some cave or some dungeon, and the dungeons in the original game were all basically like horseshoe shaped, where you would just kind of start at one end. It's a straight path. There's like maybe a branch off to the side for like a chest in a dead end, and then you leave the cave at the other end or whatever. So like, how does Octopath 2 handle like dungeon areas, like combat zones? I know it's got like the paths in between the cities, like that sort of structural flow. That's an open question to anyone.
I'll pick up on it first, at least. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say I'm early on. So I'm only a couple hours in. So anything I got to say has got to be caveated with I have really, really fresh green eyes. So far, the individual dungeons seem to still be kind of horseshoe shaped. I've only seen 2, but the order you do them, it feels less formulaic as you approach them. And like when I went to the field, I chose Throne as my character because I like to steal stuff. And I went out to the field and I was exploring the overworld map, and it's organized in a very similar way, where each area has like a recommended level, but like right away I could see areas that were like well above my level. Like, oh, this path says recommended level 16 and I'm level 8. I shouldn't be here. Oh, but there's a chest there. Maybe I can run in and steal that real quick and leave. And then even though it's kind of a very specific add-on, they marketed this, the canoe system, where the game doesn't really explain this like narrative wise, and I don't think they have to, but if you see a dock going down into the water, you can just go there and you'll jump into a canoe. Every character has one, and just explore. And it's just a way of making
something about the canoes.
Sure.
They're adorable.
They are adorable. But the thing is, what they allow you to do is they give the overworld and it's one of those things that it's individually, it's not much, like Colin was saying, but it's just enough to just elevate it just that little bit, where now that you have the canoes, you can have bridges. You can go back underneath where you've already been to find a path that, oh, that's how I go there. Or you can go to a map over, get on the canoe and go back the other way and find a chest.
To jump off of that a little bit, I feel like a lot of that stuff is what that builds up to the most for someone like me, is that it makes the open world a lot more fun to traverse. And that's the biggest thing for me that makes this like tower over the original. The world of Octopath Traveler 2 is very good.
One other thing about the open world that I just almost forgot to mention is that obviously Octopath Traveler 2 has the day-night system, which is not novel. Tons of games have a day-night system, but like
you can switch instantly with a button.
You can switch it instantly, and this is a very, very early quest. So this is just selling you the idea, and I think it worked. A very early quest outside of Throne's starting city is a person got their belongings stolen by a thief. And
same thing with Ochette. She encounters the same dude.
Same thing for Oswald.
Oh, okay. Maybe this is a tutorial quest then.
Why don't we do this? What is everyone's starting character?
Throne.
Oswald.
What was yours, Chow? What was yours, Chow?
Or Shed? Oswald.
Oh, Shed is the huntress.
Oh, hold on. Wait. Chow, what voice language do you have this game on?
Japanese.
Fucking knew it. Once I heard that, I was like, I knew why you fucking chose Ochette.
I got Aya Hirano first because that's why Ochette was my first one. Then I went straight for Oswald because he was voiced by George Naka. And then Harvey is voiced by Koyasu. Like, okay, it's Dio. It's the obvious villain, right?
Well, man, I just had to.
Really good.
I don't know if I can play in English and Japanese. They seem both really, really, very, very good. So I'm conflicted.
Is there any character who speaks like Hennet?
No.
Thank goodness.
I think they learned their lesson on
Oh yeah, dude, that's a really good question. Because I'm like, oh shit, that's right. Immediately realize.
Here's another question: if you started with oh shit, did you pick the jackal? I'm sure like 99% of the players picked the owl.
I did. Yes, I picked the owl.
Okay, so unless this is spoilers, like what are you talking about in terms of like picking an animal?
Okay, as soon as the prologue starts, they Master asks her pick an animal. It's like you can pick. These are very rare creatures. It's like there's an owl and there's a jackal, and you only get a choice of picking one.
It's a permanent companion.
Yes.
It's one or the other. You can't. There won't be eventually. Well, I mean, you don't have to spoil if it's eventually the other one's gonna come, but
it feels like you're picking your starter Pokemon. Like,
okay.
And that companion is an active like participant in her story.
Yeah.
Oh man,
so like it talks to you,
and they have separate voices. I believe.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, interesting. This game sounds fascinating. Yeah, I guess my question right now is like, all right, we're talking a lot about the writing, the characters, but another one of Octopath's strong points that we discussed earlier was the music. So I gotta know, how's the OST looking for this game?
Aces.
Ace.
It's just good. Like, that's the thing. That's the crazy.
I was gonna say, my friend never played this game before. I show him this game, and he's like, "Are you playing RO?"
What's RO? I need to be teased.
Holy shit, dude, that's crazy. I don't know. I can't tell if that's a compliment or an insult right now from you, because like RO's OST is very, very memorable and catchy. But I don't know if I have to listen to it again and see if it's quote unquote good. It's very memorable because you listen to it a lot when you play that game.
And I was using Ochette, and she had the owl as her companion, so it's like the RO hunter, right? Where they had
okay. Does it actually those that some interest similar musical motifs to that?
Well, the music may be, but it was a 2.5D sprites,
Oh, okay.
Graphic reminds of RO.
Yeah. Any well, you don't have to talk about the context of the scenes, but are there memorable tracks that you guys like specifically remember and be like, wow, that was a really high point of the game because of this track?
I wouldn't know what any of the tracks are called.
Oh, yeah, but are there moments in it that it's holy shit, the music really elevated this moment of the game?
A lot of Hikari's, I think, goes really hard in the music, which works because his whole thing is about it's without getting too much into it, it's that whole warrior redemption story.
Yep. I noticed that when they were previewing tracks, a lot of the Hikari stuff that they previewed is it's very heavy on the drums, it's very loud and somewhat boisterous almost. It's kind of reminds you of almost a Three Kingdoms era style kind of romanticization of the musical motif.
And that's what
I picked up from it. Actually, I was thinking Three Kingdoms the whole time.
And that's one of the neat things. It feels I don't know how much the original game did this, but it feels like all of the characters for their stories have unique tones to the music that's made for them. I think all of the I remember moments of all these different stories, and I remember how there's just completely unique score for all of them. Like,
Yeah.
like I was thinking of Casty's music and how it's completely different than something like Throne's. Whereas like Throne's music has a lot of like seedy underbelly. Like it feels like there's like a game parlor aesthetic to a lot of like the tracks.
I think they did that in the first game too, because I remember like Tressa had a lot more like wind flute sort of thing.
The first game, like they all had like very unique musical motifs per protagonist, but I think there's like more variation in this one depending on like certain like phases of battle, certain like I guess we're gonna get into it soon, but like especially when it comes to like different variations depending on time of day. Because another thing in this game that like they really put out, and that's like a big difference of the first game is like there's a day and night system in this game. It's not to say a day and night cycle because you can in the press of a button just like flip between day and night. And I guess that's what I was gonna like segue into in a bit, because like a lot of the first game, obviously for a lot of people, as we mentioned earlier, is like that was kind of where HD 2D was born from. Like there's very experimental with visuals, seeing how people would take to it. And like, it's a new style, it's a very novel to everyone. But now that we're a few years into HD 2D, we've seen several titles do it. We've seen the mobile game for Octopath do it. We've seen it for the Live Alive remake. We've seen it for Triangle Strategy. We've seen it for, what else am I missing? There's like one other title I'm missing.
Dragon Quest 3.
But when going into Octopath Traveler 2, they weren't going into it to like reinvent the wheel or make the new graphical style, but they wanted to show people like the evolution of HD 2D, and they wanted to like at least build upon it with like everything they've learned along the way. It's kind of like this kind of mixture of like, it's been a while now, we want to show to people like really what we've learned along the way with HD 2D. So and that's like one of the big key things of the day and night cycles, like on a whim, just in the press of a button without interrupting gameplay, they're shifting whole entire lighting systems within this HD 2D engine. So just like in general, what do you guys think about the visuals of the game?
I want to grab this one.
I have a comment.
Yeah, Adam first.
So I was watching Brian's stream. He was playing Throne's first chapter. Well, first, before I talk about that, in the original game, the visual style is very like static in the sense that everything kind of looked the same from city to city, place to place, and also like the camera angle was almost always like at the same like vantage point, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and a lot of people mentioned like the vignette style as well was kind of distracting because of the
and also the post processing. There was like an almost like an oval like shaped window that you were looking.
Well, that's what that's what Josh is referring to with the vignetting.
Yeah, exactly. I was just
oh, okay.
Extrapolating on what Josh had said. But anyways, I was watching Brian play Throne's first chapter, and there's a scene with Throne and another character on like a balcony. And first of all, it's raining, so there's like this rain effect that looks pretty nice. The pixel art looks great with like the wet brickwork on the ground. And then in the background there were like the city lights, but they were like foggy.
Yeah.
Because
it's like a depth of field bokeh type of
there's a depth of field, there's mist in the air, it's rainy, it's cloudy, and like it's a visual style. The color palette is very different than anything you'd see in the first game. And also, just from day and night, and even from screenshots that I've seen when covering the news for this game, like clearly they have a lot more variety in just like how places can look in this engine. So it seems really, really, it's been 3 or 4 years since Octopath, and they've stepped up what they can do with the style.
Okay, so there's some people that wanted to chime in. Let's go with Cullen first on this in the topic of visuals. Cullen.
You kind of got everything I was going to go for. It's just like, it's very difficult to be cynical about HD 2D anymore, because the last couple outings have been so impressive, and you can really tell they've learned a lot in just terms of like color palette, lighting. And also, I played this on Switch. I kind of wish I had played it on PC, not because the Switch version was bad, but because this game at a much higher resolution just sounds like an absolute treat. I might do a full replay on PC at some point.
Did anyone here play the original on PC, or did we all play it on Switch?
I played it on Switch.
I played on the Switch.
I played it on Switch as well. It's a huge step up.
It's definitely fascinating, though, that this is the first HD 2D game that's been available on like PC day and date with Switch, and I guess PS5 too. Like apparently that version is 4K 60, so it's like
it is. Yeah.
I still can't get over that Octopath 1 isn't on PlayStation, but it was on Xbox.
Octopath 2 is not on Xbox.
Yeah. Okay, Quentin, did you have anything to add into visuals for this game?
Yeah, I'll just say I broadly agree that the first game, once you've seen a few towns, you've kind of seen pretty much everything it has to offer. Whereas in the sequel, part of my excitement exploring the world was just I can't wait to see what the next city looks like. And considering I think that there are certainly more settlements in 2 than there were in 1, and 1 was already not lacking in that regard. I think it's a testament to all the hard work that they've done throughout their projects to perfect this engine. Every single place looks great. Some places I have more distinct memories of at night or at day, because they pop out more one way or the other. But I mean, that's to be understood. And then there are places like this garden. I won't get into it too in depth, but there's this place for one of the characters' stories, a dungeon where you're going through like a trellis garden, and during the daytime you can kind of see that it's like got one of those famous like garden mazes things with the hedges, and then at night the lighting is just, I don't know what they do about this place, but it's unlike any other place in the game, and it's just ridiculously pretty. And I'm glad that I played it on PS5 personally, because 4K, holy crap.
Two questions. One with the day and night cycle, when you press the button, obviously like it doesn't just like do it instantaneously. You see like the time of day progressing into like the next phase of the I'm kind of interested to see like what your guys' thoughts like are on that, because I think it's a really fascinating effect they do where they kind of simulate like passage of day and time very rapidly to like show that like you're here now in the day or in the night. I think that's just like a really, really cool effect. I was wondering like, can you like move at all throughout that whole segment, or is it like you have to be static for that to like take
I think
effect?
you can move.
It's instant.
Yeah.
Well, it's like a 2-second transition, or maybe like a 1.5 second. So it's not so instant where it feels like you're turning a light switch on and off. So it has just
Someone's
enough.
already complaining on Steam about it. They're like, "This is unrealistic." Like, wow.
Well, I actually appreciate that they learned that like, okay, this is a game. It can have like mechanisms that don't need to be explained, like the canoe. Like, why does Throne have a canoe? Sometimes games get too, I think, caught up with, does this make narrative sense or is it fun? And I know there's a lot of nuance to that, but the game was just like, yep, you have a canoe. Yep, you can change the time of day because that's our vision. And to kind of go back on something that Cullen said way earlier, I'm glad that they took the feedback to the original game and they didn't just go back to the drawing board. They didn't upend the table. They're just like, oh, nope, this is a game where it's going to be 8 independent stories. We heard the complaints, or maybe not complaints, but just the criticism that, people want more interaction. They want it to be less formulaic. Because I saw some people saying like, well, why can't the first game just have the party interact like a normal JRPG party? It's like, well, there's other games that do that. This game is trying something different. We have a vision. We're going to tweak it rather than upend it. And then
I'm glad they didn't just like, let's just make this game like every other JRPG.
That's a thing.
I talk about that specifically in my review as well, and where it's like I'm seeing a lot of people say like, oh, well, they didn't make the game what I wanted it to be, so it's a bad sequel, like just from reading reviews. And it's like, I don't know how to tell you this. There are a billion RPGs on the market with linear plot focused progression, like where you just get your whole party and you go through town by town by town in a fake open world, like a fake world map of where you're really just going on a linear path and you're doing all these beats in order. Octopath is gameplay focused at its heart, and
I think it's like it's kind of fair for people like, hey, they were hoping that like the sequel, the follow up would address their problem, like their issues of the first one. Not to say that like the dev team should like bend to the middle or anything.
I'm not saying
it's totally fine that like some people are disappointed to like.
And we're not saying you have to like it, but I appreciate that the developers like, yeah, you can say like, okay, I've tried Octo 1, they've tweaked it. I tried Octo 2, the format's not for me, and that's fine. But I'm glad that the developers are like, oh nope, this is what we want to make. We want to provide something that's just a little bit different. And on the conversation of visuals, and then I'll hand it back off to you, Colin. I know we got a lot of people in this chat room. Is when we were talking about how when Quentin was mentioning the variety and the locations and the night and day differences, it's kind of like I feel like we're going into what Quentin said earlier about how appreciating the first game less. Like the first game was not ugly. I guess some people would say it's ugly, but at the same time, as soon as that first game came out or was first being marketed, people were immediately jumping on, imagine Chrono Trigger in this art style, imagine Final Fantasy VI in this art style. Like it wasn't, it presented itself well, But then you just look at Octo 2, and now we're looking back on it with like whatever the opposite of rose-tinted glasses are. Like, man, that first game was really quite bland and samey.
I mean, yeah, but we also come at a time where it's like it kind of did like a really funny, ironic thing where like the sequel is now released after like we got a Live Alive remake that adopted this HD2D style, and Live Alive was a direct inspiration of the first game creating it. So it's like we've kind of gone full circle on that in a really funny, weird way. And then and Live Alive looked fucking crazy good in the HD2D, the way they revitalized that game, and really like that game really popped with like the variety of its storylines and scenarios under this graphical engine that kind of showed another side to this engine that like wasn't really seen in other previous projects with it. I guess my other quick question before on the visuals before everything got out of line, like my other quick question on it was like, when in the day and night cycle stuff, like can you do it like anywhere, like even in the roads, like in between the towns, or only in towns?
Anywhere.
Okay, got it.
Even in dungeons, which is really funny. Like if you're in a cave, you could still do it.
Yeah,
Okay.
Change. I want to say real quick, my favorite thing about the swapping between day and night, and I think anyone else, like it sounds like all of us here who really appreciate the soundtrack to the first game will also dig this, is one of my favorite little like nonsensical things that I did a billion times throughout the game was I would swap between the day and night while running around in towns, in routes, anywhere where there's any sort of change, which is most places. And you listen to the music change, but it shifts delicately. There's a correct musical term for this. It's escaping me, but the way that it just kind of flows from the daytime theme, let's say, to the nighttime theme after I press R2 on the PS5 controller. So I got a real kick out of listening to like the bombastic swing sound of this city going into the, and kind of going back and forth. And I mean, to me, that's testament again, a great soundtrack that I was like a kid at a candy shop doing that whole
I'm really probably something I like, I can't wait to actually do too, is like, hearing the transition of like the day version to the night version, and seeing like how the symphony kind of transitions over in between those two styles, because they're like, I hear they're two distinct, unique music themes. So I'm just seeing like how the bridge to each other.
Well, that was something they exhibited in the first game as they transitioned over to boss fights from the. But anyway, Colin, a bit back, you wanted to state something, and we crowded you out. Do you remember what you
I forget a little bit what I was going to talk about. Just because
there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah. Like, if it was any like we were kind of on the topic of like certain people's expectations of this game, and kind of like why they were, some of them are bummed out, understandably so, because it's like a lot of people have their own expectations of like, or their own image of like what their ideal game they want it to be, right? And
and I don't think you're like necessarily at fault if you're disappointed that you don't have to like this game. Like I think opinions on this game could lay anywhere on the rating scale, and I'd be like, that makes sense. It is super like what you look for in an RPG will depend how much you like this game. I think one of the important things that made the Octopath formula like for me was I became a Saga fan. And if you're into Saga games, you should check this out, because I feel like there's enough going on here where you'll probably appreciate what it's doing compared to a lot of modern games on the market right now. But I do think it's commendable that when getting the chance to make a sequel, they could have easily made this the game that a lot of people complained about and said they wanted, but instead they opted to make, like, they did what they did again, but they tried to just make those people understand more what they were doing, because there is like more character interaction. Like there's a lot of like party chat going on during those main stories, so it doesn't feel like
okay. So here's this is about one of my main concerns, like leading up to release, and I was wondering how it's going to shake out, because one of the first things they really mentioned in this game is like, hey, there's going to be like these crossover story chapters. So like in my head, like I wasn't sure how they were going to implement this, because I was thinking, okay, we'll do maybe chapter 1 or chapter 2 of a X character, and then maybe chapter 1, chapter 2 Y character, and then I was assuming once you fulfill those requirements, you unlock this crossover chapter of character X and character Y, and then like they'll acknowledge each other's existence and hang out and do whatever thing they'll do, and then after that, like, do they like diverge again and like like do not acknowledge each other's existence again until like another crossover chapter. Like I'm not sure exactly how that system works.
You kind of got it. It's interesting because I wouldn't really even consider it's like they don't acknowledge each other's existence. I more so just kind of take it as it's like those characters don't really need to weigh in. Like I'm thinking about a version of Octopath 2 where you get all your characters and then everyone feels the need to chime in on everyone else's stories.
Ugh, that sounds terrible.
It sounds like it's the version of like I think this game that people want is that, and that's not like every chapter in Octopath 2 can be done in about an hour or two.
Well, I'm just thinking because like remember like I don't know if you ever saw this in the first Octopath, but in Octopath 1, like it got into like really weird points, like especially with the thief character. And like a lot of his story was like, oh, I work alone. I'm like gonna go after this. It's like hard for you to trust anyone ever again. And then like in the first chapter or second chapter, like he like there are like other people trying to recruit him or like Chinese like say let me help you or let me do this or whatever. And then he's like, no, I work alone. But when it's type like raid like a mansion of like someone bad or something, like he just randomly had like the other Octopath 1 characters with him, and I was just, like for no reason because like that's the game how the game was designed. So like they technically never acknowledge each other's existence. They're just kind of there, right? And that's because the narrative crafted that. The narrative is crafted in a way that like felt directly contradictory to what was going on because of the game's design, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, they avoided that.
Okay.
It's a very easy thing to do. You just don't write characters like that.
Exactly. That's the thing, right? Like
even Throne, who is distant from everybody else, still is not written in a way where she doesn't like, I don't need help. I work alone. It's just Throne is a bit less hesitant to open herself up to everyone else. And again, now correct me if I'm wrong. This is just something I've heard. Isn't it like party chat moments? Weren't they only accessible in the bars?
I believe so. They were only
in the taverns. Like yeah, they were like one or two liners to each other. Like it was very, very, very brief.
So that's still like the one or two liners thing is kind of still a thing, but now they happen in the stories themselves, like a traditional, like a Tales of like skit segment.
Okay. Again, so there's a little bit there, just a tiny bit more, which might be like okay, all right.
It's another one of those things where it's just like a tiny tweak, where it's like, yeah, the party chat is fundamentally the same, but the fact that they just pulled it out of the tavern is just a little turning the knob.
And they make it relevant.
It's very easy to turn the top knob the other way to the max, where it's like it's just too much. Like I know we bring it up a lot, but like it's a very common trope. Like in like saying a series like Trails, where like every single party member has to chime in on like before a boss encounter of like we have like 30 people here. They all have to do like one line before the boss battle starts.
And can we get this going? I have a meeting.
Yeah.
Like this is an aside, but I was watching Brian play Fire Emblem Engage, and he was playing the final level, and then like as soon as all the characters start doing their like, got to say my one line here, but I just start like mashing through it, like shut up. I don't care.
Yeah, and
that would probably work if that game had like better characters.
Maybe.
Like when I played,
very, very common trope.
No, yeah, I like it in Fire Emblem, in the Fire Emblem games in which I like the cast. Like when that happened in Echoes, I sat through all of them because I was like, yeah, this is so raw, this is so based, and yeah, I can imagine Engage. I'll be like, all right, pick it up.
Well, like Engage, one tiny tangent on Engage. Like I love the final level, like its design, its challenge. I really enjoyed that, but I skipped through all the dialogue. Like I don't care about anything you have to say. I just want to fight this dragon thing, whatever it was.
But yeah, to just kind of like wrap up the little thing about like the party chat. The party chat, the way they've changed it is a direct response to a lot of the criticism that the characters don't chime in, and it is literally just you do an important little cutscene in that character's chapter, someone will comment on it, and then the protagonist will then respond to that. And it's a totally little optional thing, but it adds a lot because the character will be like, hey, that was kind of weird, or, oh, I see why you did that.
I think it's just like the little tiny acknowledgement that they like someone else exists in that scene, which might, a little goes a long way in that.
And they still have the bar stuff too, but again, they kind of stepped it up, to the play a little bit more. as you get further into the game, I've noticed. I don't know what the qualifiers are for this sort of thing to trigger offhand, but I started getting stuff where like 3 people instead of 2 would be talking, and they'd actually have like a full conversation, like skits where like, oh, insert character here is, deep in his cups, and the other one's trying to help him, and the other one's like trying to make a commotion and that sort of thing. So like full-fledged just stuff was going on, and it was just, totally optional, easy to miss. You're not missing anything huge, but it adds a little bit more weight to the cast.
I use like a silly real world example. It's like, let's say me, Cullen, Brian, and Quentin went to a basketball game, and then it's just like we're all cheering on for like the same team in it. Of course, we're gonna like, even if we're not like talking about the game as it's happening, we're still saying "holy shit" to each other when like something big happens, instead of just celebrating on our own, not even like acknowledging that you have other people to enjoy the moment with, and that it's just like, even if it's like just little things like, damn, that was dope, it's like you're not having a meaningful conversation, just at least you're just enjoying the moment together.
Yeah.
I do want to make one other comment just on the visuals. I know we kind of moved past that, but we talked about how Live Alive really, Colin and Quentin weren't here on the podcast when we talked about it, but I spoke to how well that game looks. And prior to that, I talked about how much I didn't like Triangle Strategy, because Triangle Strategy was it's still a good looking game, but they hadn't quite, I think, dialed in the post-processing effects on how that looks. So Adam talked about the cutscene at the very beginning of Throne's story where they're on the rooftop, and it's got like the depth of field effect. And depth of field typically in a game is something I just kind of turn off like without thinking about it. But sometimes I think you need a little bit more nuance than that. In this game, you don't have the option to turn off the depth of field, at least not inherently. Maybe you can mess with settings in the back end. I don't know. But in Triangle Strategy, there is this scene early on where there's 2 characters in like different corners of a room. And as the camera pans between them, the other gets out of focus and they're in the same room. It's like, this is turned up way too high. Like, there's no reason why the guy in the back of the room should be a blurry smidge compared to the guy in the front of the room. However, in Live Alive, I felt like it was toned way down. And then in Octopath 2, so far, it's toned way down, where it makes sense. Like, okay, those are skyscrapers in the background, like, hundreds of feet away. So they're going to be blurry, and then that's fine. Or I'm in a cathedral at the starting of Temenos' chapter, and you're in a very long corridor, and only when you first enter is the back wall at the far end of the screen blurry, and it comes into focus really quickly. Okay, so again, it's like one of those things where they just tweaked it. Like, no, we really like having this like diorama foreground, background depth of field effect, but we're going to just dial it in a little bit, make it look a little bit cleaner. And I think just the outcome, if you're all or nothing and you just hate depth of field just unilaterally, it's still there. But I do feel like it's implemented just a lot more smartly.
I think that's really like a weird growing pain for like smaller indie companies, like to kind of adopt that mentality, because like, I talked about Wandering Sword a few weeks back, like the Chinese RPG that has that HE2D thing, and like the depth of field is like cranked up way too high on it. Like there's a lot of there's a lot of blurry like background things that are like not that far away, but it's still very blurry. It's like, it's just one of those weird like growing pains of like, look, you're chasing after what Octopath 1 did, but you need to like not just. You must not pay attention to the weird depth of field shit that game did. Please, I believe in you. Don't do that.
And even the vignetting effect you guys talked about, it's still there, but it's just a lot more subtle. It doesn't look like you're looking through a viewport of a submarine or something. It's just very, very, the color gets slightly darker on the very fringes of the screen, it's almost where you don't notice it, which is exactly what you want it to be.
Go for it, Colin.
I was going to say immediate first impression on this was that like, and again, I'm not shy about it. I'm the Switch guy. I like playing all my games on my Switch. One thing I did appreciate about Triangle Strategy initially was, thank God I can turn all that shit off. It was so nice to turn off all those garish post-processing effects. And when I boot up Octopath, and this is interesting to hear that you can't on PC either, is that there weren't like any graphics options. So initially I was like, that sucks. That's a downgrade. And then as I play, I realize, no, yeah, these are all made with intent and they're crafted better. Like they use all of these post-processing effects with subtlety to enhance scenes where it's like, I don't want them off because they're done well now. And it really just goes to show, it's like, that really feels like the whole design ethos of the game. We're not changing everything. We're sticking to our guns. We're taking feedback and we're making it work better.
There are settings on the PC version. I haven't quite looked to see exactly how they're binned. Like there might be just like a general toggle for like quality setting that might also affect it. I'll double check here. I'll put it up in the background. I just didn't see an option specifically for depth of field or for vignetting, but they might be binned under another more generic heading. I'll have to double check.
I have a question. It's more gameplay related. Obviously, this still has the same like break and boost system that the first game did, where like each enemy has like a certain like weaknesses, but they're all in question marks until like you get the certain weapon type or spell to like show that like, hey, you're bringing down this number. Once you bring down this number, you break them. They're stunned for a turn, and then they also take way more damage coming at them. So one of the weird things about the first Octopath, and I don't know if they rectified like this or not to some extent, but like in the first Octopath, there was like a very big problem of like, hey, you're kind of like not wasting, but like you're kind of taking 3 to 4 turns, sometimes 5 turns to like kind of get this number down, and then your whole big payload damage is only like focused in like 1 or maybe 2 turns, but like it just had like that certain like flow to combat where like you feel like you weren't really doing much damage until like one big turn, and then you have to go through that process all over again of feeling like you're doing inky dinky damage until one big payload. So is this more of the same in the sequel, or did they like find ways to kind of like rectify the flow of battle where it feels like you're kind of at least having more windows of opportunity to dish out damage?
I think the latent power system helps with that a little bit. The first 2 characters that I've had, as far as I'm at, is Throne and Temenos. And both of their latent powers interact with that system a bit. Throne can act twice in a turn, so basically you can deplete their shield faster. And Temenos can deplete the shield even if they don't have the proper weapon.
Okay.
Yeah, Canoes is interesting because on paper it's not that most of the latent powers are like these hugely flashy ideas, but it's like perhaps the least flashy of all, and yet handily one of my favorites. Because if you have several BP battle points kind of like docked with him and ready to go, but the boss isn't broken yet, you can activate that latent power and then just have him whack with his staff like 4 or even 5 times and shatter through 5 of those shields, doing extra damage as a result, but also getting you faster to that point. So I would say like yes and no. No in the sense that that same loop is still kind of there, but yes in kind of like what Brian just said, like everybody sort of has their own ways now to either expedite it or work around it so that you still feel like you're doing a little bit more than you did before.
So like latent powers, like is there a new system? Are they like, do they consume a certain resource? How do you actually activate these latent powers?
You fill your
like
meter.
Limit Break.
They're kind of like Limit Break, but they're toned down a bit. They're not super flashy. Like, well, at least where I'm at in the game. Maybe they get flashier later, but like Throne's latent power is she acts twice. So it's not like a giant Limit Break or Overdrive or Summon, but it's just like a little boost that you get. It's a meter that you fill. I believe it's whenever you take damage or whenever you break an enemy. And it fills relatively quickly. Go ahead.
For another example, I think like Partitio's is that he just maxes all of his BP.
Okay. Yeah.
And then if you get his class far enough, you can combine that with one of his skills where he gives BP.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So they are finding ways to like giving you more options to like build up resources and stuff, like keep the flow of combat somewhat consistent, and like you can vary it up like because of these latent powers and like and then whatever other modifiers you can use to synergize with them.
Yeah. Forgive me for being a little off topic on that for just a second, but
yeah.
I was thinking about this and it just reminded me about one of my low-key favorite things about the game, which is everybody has, it seems, a lot more incidental battle dialogue now for doing things that don't automatically, fit their job class per se. So like when you're equipping like a secondary class, everybody has very character specific little dialogue quirks and stuff. And I was just remembering with Partitios, because I remember when you do what Cullen was just saying, and I was kind of like, I had his lines stuck in my brain. And I remember that as his secondary class for a long time, I've had him as a cleric.
Mm-hmm.
And he casts his healing spell. He says to the party, and I quote, "Salvation's on discount today, partners." I mean,
that's good. That's good.
Ridiculous. But everybody has that, which is nice. Yeah.
It's a very stupid thing, but you reminded me because I've been playing a lot of Theatrhythm lately. But like Squall, whenever he's the leader of the party, and like you go into a battle stage, his dialogue is, "I can't dance."
Yeah.
I'm like, God damn it. That's really good. So yeah, I mean that sounds interesting. What are the main things that like I thought dead to rights they would bring into the sequel from the mobile game was the dual party system. Not dual party, but like in the mobile game, you can bring up to 8 characters in battle, and like each of the 4, you can have them tag out with like a backline character in that game. So like you can have them like synergize with each other. There's like abilities that like enhance people in the back line or in the front line. And like I thought that was like a really interesting system. It's like, oh, that feels like a system that they would like introduce in the sequel or bring back in the sequel. But they showed that like, hey, there's still only 4 characters in battle. It's like, wow, really? I thought that dual system from the mobile game was like they were gonna bring that into the full mainline game.
That seems like sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to chime in because that seems like something where like the Octopath 2 and the mobile game probably started dev around the same time, and they just did their own separate things. You see this often with like game design nowadays, where like I think this was big with the Persona spin-offs that just recently happened, where you could tell that Royal and Strikers were developed at the same time, so ideas could not really flow into one another and be shared.
Also, it's very probable that Fire Emblem Engage and Three Houses overlapped a lot of development time too.
Right.
Yeah. So I imagine if this sells well enough to make an Octopath 3, that seems like something we're probably going to see.
Yeah.
They dabble very slightly. That's probably as much as I should say. They dabble. They kind of flirt with it at one point.
Okay.
From what I imagine you're saying, I think they toy with it at one point, but that's it. Yeah.
Okay.
To pull out an old topic thread, I pulled up my PC version of the game. They have the rendering options binned, like post-processing, low, high, highest, and effects, low, high, highest. So I don't know like what bloom or depth of field or vignetting is binned in. It might be binned in one or both of those, but very generic options. So you might be able to tweak it out if you really don't like the depth of field. Maybe turn post-processing to low, and it might.
I will leave it up to the Steam discussion forums. If they find it, they find it. If they don't, they don't.
Yeah,
that's basically my how I see it. But I mean, I think that's for me. That's kind of you hit a lot of the talking points of Octopath 2 that I was interested in. I was wondering what else you guys wanted to.
Yeah, we're an hour in. We've talked about the story, the graphics, the soundtrack, the differences between this and the first game. We even got in a little bit of discussion about the differences between this and the mobile game. We talked a little bit about the story and how it is just cleaner and presented better, and just in English voice acted a little bit better. I will say that like Throne's first story bit is a little bit cliche, but I found myself like it was still put together well enough that I didn't mind it. And then especially, without spoiling it, I really liked how Temenos' story opened up. Really kind of clever, quite fun. I don't want to say more than that because it would ruin it, but it's just fun and cool and different.
Yes.
Say that again?
I'm sorry. I'm just remembering the character from Temenos, the sidekick guy. When he's saying Temenos has that sidekick character right from the game GIF.
I don't think Brian's there yet.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Oh, okay. Well, then just ignore that outburst completely.
Oh, all right.
But no, Temenos' intro chapter is very fun.
Yeah.
Temenos himself breaks a good amount of cliches, I feel. At least that's what I thought.
And he's the cleric, but just for those listening, Temenos was a cleric. And he honestly had kind of the most like boring marketing intro, but yeah, I've been enjoying him too.
He is not what you would expect from him, and it's a lot of fun.
It is.
Well, I'm sure we will have other opportunities to talk about Octopath as more people get to it, as more people get further into it. Obviously, we'll have people playing it maybe on different consoles and, as we go into the later months of the year. But we've been talking about it for an hour, and I do appreciate that we were able to get both Cullen and Quentin on board to discuss their time with the game since they had a chance to cover it for the different outlets. So we're
up on.
Yeah, of course. We're going to go on to another game that came out in the last couple of weeks. And this is one that we had talked about having a few people really interested in based on the pedigree of the developer. And the game I'm talking about is Redemption Reapers. Now, before I continue on to there, Cullen and or Quentin, did either of you have to step out now that we've concluded with the Octopath Traveler 2 talk for now?
I don't have to step out per se, but I will probably step back from talking about this because I have not yet played it.
I am going to hop out since I to have some plans already. But again, it was really great to be here, and I look forward to doing it again sometime.
Yeah, of course. And thank you for providing an hour of your time to talk about Octopath with us.
Yeah, of course.
Have a great weekend.
Yep, you too.
Yeah, take care, Quentin.
See, I'm hanging out for our game 3 discussion.
All right, so into our game 2 discussion. Like I introduced, it is Redemption Reapers. We have talked about this game as being a game from the minds of a few Fire Emblem veterans. And with this discussion, I'm going to hand the topic off over to Adam, who has had a chance to play through it.
Okay, so Redemption Reapers released 3 days ago on PC, Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4. Yeah, need something?
No, I was just saying at the time of recording, we're recording this on Saturday the 25th. So.
Right. So earlier this week. And so this game, if you're not familiar with it, it's developed and published. It's published by Binary Haze Interactive and developed by AdGlobe. They are the publisher-developer team behind Ender Lilies, which is a side-scroller Metrovania type game that released a few years ago. That was generally really well received and I think sold nearly 1 million copies. Now, this game is obviously a very different type of game. It is a strategy RPG, and one second here. I know I do this every week. It's helmed by one of the directors of the Fire Emblem series, who did level design on Thracia 776. Was the director of Fire Emblem Path of Radiance, and also did some work on Fire Emblem Fates. Let me get his name here. His name is Masayuki Horikawa. So there's a Fire Emblem pedigree to this game, and it also has the writer of some Metal Gear Solid titles, as well as the composer to Bayonetta, and also some other Fire Emblem titles. So it's got a really strong pedigree behind this game. Now, I've beaten the game. I actually just beat it earlier today. It is not a Fire Emblem clone. So I know there's a handful of games out there where it just kind of feels like, I like Fire Emblem, so I'm going to make my own. There are small parts of this game that do remind me of like Path of Radiance or Thracia, but it's structured quite differently from a Fire Emblem game. I guess I don't normally start out like this, but what is the first thing you want to hear about this game?
Where is it on a scale from Diofield Chronicle to Final Fantasy?
Okay, that's actually a good starting point, because in ways this game does feel like a Diofield Chronicle. But
I was not expecting to talk about Diofield.
Oh my god!
I saw this and it was like the year of Diofield continues.
So the way this reminds me of Diofield is not at all in how it plays, because it plays completely differently. If you heard our podcast or read my review for Diofield, you know it's more like almost like a real-time strategy game than a grid-based tactical RPG. But the way that it reminds me of Diofield is that this is not a well-rounded game. It is not a game that I think will have wide appeal. It has a very narrow game design to it that I think is very opinionated and very sharp, and it can be very easy to fall off one side or the other of it. And the first half of this game, or the first third of this game, is very oppressive against the player in the sense that, first of all, let me say, you only get 5 characters. There are only 5 characters in the game, and you're facing off against like 20, 25, 30 enemies in a map. And this game, its healing is very hard to come by, money is very hard to come by, and your weapons do degrade. And so like dealing with your sort of weapon management and durability is something you kind of always have to keep at the forefront of your mind as you're playing through this game. And so it's not at all friendly to the player, to me, as I'm playing through this. You have to be very careful. You have to minimize the damage you take. And you also have to... So this game...
Are there difficulty settings, or did you just...
No. Well, there's a hard mode that comes when you beat the game, but first time through, just one difficulty. And it's pretty tough, at least early on. And so the thing with this game, one of the key gameplay mechanics to it is that characters can follow up each other if they're like in the right position. So you have a couple of characters who are basically like close range fighters. Like the main character's name is Sarah. She wields 2 daggers, and she has to be right next to an enemy to attack them. There's another character named Luff who uses a spear, but he can attack from 2 places away. There's also a character named Karin who is a bow wielder, and they can attack from like 4 spaces away. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is that a key gameplay component, and probably like the singular key gameplay component to this game, is how characters can follow up attacks from each other. And so when you're facing off against all these enemies, you have to be like very efficient in how you proceed and like what order your characters act in, who they attack, and where they position themselves. Because unlike Fire Emblem, where you kind of like move and then you attack and then you're done for most characters, you can't move again. In this game, you can move, attack, and then move again.
Okay, interesting.
So it's actually very important to be not only to know who are you going to attack on this turn, but where are you going to place your character after they're done. And the reason why that's important is you need to maximize all the targets and attacks you can possibly get to take out enemies as efficiently as possible, because you have to, or else you're going to take too many hits and take too much damage. And then, like I said, early on in this game, healing is very hard to come by. The only way you can heal starting out is each character basically has a vulnerary, like from Fire Emblem. It's like it replenishes after every battle, so it's not like a consumable, but you get 1 per battle, and once you use it, you're done. Early on in the game, there are no healers, there's no healing staff or anything. You get your 1 kind of patch up, and that's it. And it's very easy when you're taking on like 20, 30 enemies to get that 1 patch up, and then you get hit again, and you're like, well, shoot, now I can't heal. So it's the type of game where I could see people bouncing off this immediately because it's not easy. It's definitely not DioField in that sense. And
it sounds like Fiarsa 776.
Yes,
that game
exactly.
is really hard.
Exactly. There are small ways in which this game does feel like Thracia, and which is again, grounded in the sense that the person who led this game was, I believe, a designer on Thracia. And so there are small ways in which it reminds me of that. I don't think it comes together like greatly. I think it's interesting that it does kind of balance itself in sort of this strange way. But at least going into this game, you have to kind of be aware of that. It's the type of game where you feel like you are struggling as you play it. As you go through the game, you do eventually get some more ways to heal. You eventually get more ways to get money so you can repair weapons a little bit more easily rather than having to I actually found, this is going to sound stupid as hell, but I actually found, so you get a couple of different weapons that you can use. They're similar to like Fire Emblem, where you get like your iron sword, your steel sword, your silver sword. And I actually found when you have a weapon that's broken, it doesn't do as much damage, but it's still usable. And I actually found, you know what? I'm going to keep this weapon broken and still use it as a
yeah.
I'm just going to use it as sort of like my pick-off weapon. Like if you only need to do a sliver of damage, because it's basically as damaged as it's going to get. You're not going to waste any more money repairing it. I'm just going to keep this weapon broken and use it as sort of like, oh, this enemy has only 4 health left. Sure, I can pick that off with this broken dagger.
It's like 200 IQ move.
I don't know if that's the intention, but that's what I ended up doing.
Hey, you got to use what you got,
Yeah.
You got to stick, you got to stick.
So it does. There's also, so this game is structured for like the first 5 chapters or so, like a Path of Radiance, where you go from chapter to chapter in a linear progression. There are other things that are sort of Path of Radiance like, where you get, depending on how well you do at the previous mission, you get, I forget what they call it, party EXP, I think, which is basically like bonus EXP in Path of Radiance, where you can kind of just spend it on your characters at the base. So you get EXP in battle, of course, but then you kind of get like a secondary pool, which is sort of useful to have. Like, hey, this character is maybe falling behind a little bit, so let me kind of boost them up once or twice, with this bonus EXP I got. So that reminds me of Path of Radiance in that sense. But after around like chapter 5 or 6 or so, you do unlock skirmishes. Skirmishes are kind of like early on, it's almost like a double-edged sword, because like I'm going to do this skirmish and maybe get some experience, but I'm going to wear away my weapons if I do this, and you can't get a lot of money. So like if I do this skirmish, I'll get some EXP, but my weapons are going to be even worse shape than when I.
Sometimes you've got worse off than you've had going in. That's interesting.
Yeah. And there is a skirmish where you there's a skirmish relatively early on, maybe like chapter 8 or 9, where you can earn a bronze ingot from it, which you can sell for a whole 150 gold, which is not a lot. But I actually found myself like so poor and needy. I need this 150 gold, but I'm gonna go through this level trying to get it. And we have to spend like 100 of that gold just to repair the weapons that I used up trying to get it. So I've come out 50 gold more richer than I was. But that's the type of game it is, at least in the first half. You like are really working within your means. And then the game actually does a really, well, maybe not really, but a notably interesting thing at this point. This is a very light gameplay spoiler, but after around, I think it's like chapter 14 or so, which is like the halfway point, your characters end up going on the run for a while. And then when you're on the run, you cannot skirmish. And if you're in a situation where you enter this section of the game and you don't have a lot of money, you don't have a lot of weapons, because they're broken or whatnot, they're low on durability, you have to do like 5 chapters in a row without the ability to skirmish. And what that means is you cannot get any more EXP or money than what those levels, basically those 5 levels, offer you. Because of course, if you're in a narrative sense, if you are on the run, you're not going to go out and like, let's go fight some random dudes over here for some money. But that means you're kind of like really limited in what like your resources in that point. And at the end of that, at the end of this section of the game, you kind of reach like a safe haven temporarily where skirmishes are unlocked again. And at that point, it's almost like a palpable like relief. Like, thank God we got away.
My question is like, when it comes to like objective design in this game, like, is it very like our objectives leaning more towards like, hey, like to successfully get through this battle, you just have to like kill this specific target, or does it really like lean into like defeat all enemies here, and then it's really makes you force you to like use your resources?
It's a mixed bag. In some ways, I do think it tries. In some ways, I would say it's even better speaking pure objectives than like Fire Emblem Engage, where like you have to escort a unit or you have to flee this map or whatever. Whereas Fire Emblem Engage didn't really have any of that. It had one escape level, but there are a couple of levels where it feels like it's an illusion. And what I mean by that is there's a couple of levels where you get to a map and the objective is to either flee the map or defeat any enemy. However, every enemy, excuse me. However, the problem is you start on one side of the map. The space you're supposed to flee to is on the other side of the map, and all the enemies are in the way.
So you're just gonna
you're basically like you're gonna have to fight them all anyway. Like
it's just a devs being dicks at that point. It's like
so whether or not you decide to flee or you decide to defeat all the enemies, you're practically the same.
Yeah, you're still wasting up a shitload of your resources. There's no way to really brute force that at that point of like trying to like be conservative on,
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, story-wise, this game has some really interesting concepts that I don't think it executes well. And I know that's a very, very easy thing to say. It's a hard thing for me to maybe explain on that without spoiling it.
Well, what's the premise? Like, what's our starting point?
The premise is not immediately clear starting out. It becomes more into focus in the second half of the game.
Okay.
But basically, you are a group of 5 mercenaries known as the Ashen Hawks. You are mercenaries for some reason, unknown to you, but you are mercenaries, and you are fighting a group of enemies. This is a silly name. They are called the Mort. M-O-R-T.
Mort.
The Mort.
Oh, okay.
Now, the Mort are basically like thralls or orcs, from Lord of the Rings or whatnot. And this is one thing that is not necessarily inherently a bad thing, but it's something that I wasn't really expecting, and I'm not sure if I like it. The villains, the enemies in this game, the Mort, they will never talk. I beat the game. No Mort enemy ever speaks. They are just mindless orc zombie things.
Did you encounter anyone called like Mortius or something?
No.
Okay.
None of them have. They have like, you can go through the menu and like know like their unit names, but there's like a leader Mort, and there's like the arrow Morts, and then there's like the sword Morts, which are Morts. But there's no like villain in this game other than just these creatures. So when you're talking about like the conflict that is presented in the narrative of this game, it's just that these creatures are dangerous and threatening, obviously, the livelihood of people. And, that is a conflict, but, it's just that the face of it is literally just these mindless enemies, which, again, is not necessarily a bad thing, like be almost any zombie game or show or whatever. But it's just kind of like there is no charismatic antagonist. There's no like person to hate, like lovable, hateable villain or antagonist of any sort. It's just kind of these monsters. And then that means as you're going through the game just kind of throws excuses at you to get into like a battle, like, oh, the Mort are taking over this cathedral. We have to clear it out as basically a safe haven, or as almost like a fortress, to rest some refugees, and then you fight them there. So you kind of get these like limp, just kind of excuses to have a map there, which is, it's a video game. It's fine in that sense. But if you're looking for something like a really intricate narrative in that sense, it's not. It's really more focused on just like, here are some enemies, we're going to shove them here, and you're going to do a battle here. That's just the type of game it is, really. So it's not really like a narrative focus in that sense. There is an interesting narrative kind of concept to the game that, like I said, kind of comes in the focus in the second half. But it's revolved around the name Redemption Reapers, and what are they actually like redeeming here, and what are they reaping. But I still think without spoiling it anymore, it doesn't quite click together well. It's like there was a good idea here, and I actually do appreciate what it tried to do in the narrative. It's just kind of like, I wish it was maybe presented a little different and maybe tweaked here and there if I had my own fan fiction to rewrite it myself.
How long is this game? Did it take you?
They said it takes about 20 to 25 hours. I was more around 30, but in the second half of the game, I did kind of like in the second half of the game, things do lighten up. Things do get a little bit easier in terms of like, you can get more money now. You eventually get a chance to skirmish whenever you want. So you can just get more money if you need it. And I kind of at the second half of the game, just like, all right, I just need to like boost my guys up just to get them, to be ridiculously strong. So I did.
So I guess for people like who is this game for? Like, who would you recommend for? Do you recommend like the people who like Thracia, or do you people that want it for people like challenging strategy RPGs?
Yeah, it's if you like Thracia, then this might be a game that you can at least appreciate parts of it, which is probably in the boat I land in. I haven't written my written review yet. I'm probably, like 7 at the highest, maybe a 6.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just think it's very uneven in places.
But you appreciate the effort.
But yeah, so like, for example, when I reviewed Diofield, I really liked Diofield, like in what it tries to do. I scored it a 7 because I do think there are lots of things about it that are just kind of like, very loosely done, or just kind of, threadbare, or maybe very, uneven or whatnot. But, I still overall like that game. And this game, like I said, I kind of categorize it the same way. Even though it plays very differently. It's like, okay, maybe in that same ballpark or so. I will say that if you were just the average Fire Emblem fan, you will not like this game. I don't know if that's disparaging to Fire Emblem fans. I'm sorry.
I mean, if you're coming into this as like a person who likes modern Fire Emblem in terms of in terms of like the difficulty level, like general difficulty level, like modern Fire Emblem isn't really that challenging or that demanding.
Yeah. Also, like this game, there's only 5 characters. There's no support conversations.
Somniel?
Sorry,
there's your Somniel. Can people wake me up?
All your base is a menu, just like in Path of Radiance, which I know Brian would appreciate. But the characters in this game, they're like fine. But again, it's the story and the way this game is written is more about like kind of like the group, rather than like, oh, this character is like, we're gonna write this character to be as interesting as possible, or have like a really cool like backstory or like motivation or something. It's just more about the group as a whole. It's more like an ensemble sort of writing, and it's fine. It's more like the concept behind it that I think is at least a little bit interesting. But if you're a player who really likes like, if you really like character writing and things like that, or if you really like really involved narratives, probably not. It's more just kind of like concepts here that I think are cool, rather than
like it seems like the main allure of the game is just like having like somewhat challenging strategy RPG that like forces you to like interface with systems and limited resources. Like if you really like that style of strategy RPG, like it forces you to like do that.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say is this game actually has a fair number of like animated cutscenes, which is interesting because
like 2D animated, or how do you mean that?
No, that's like, sorry, I meant like cutscenes, just like a traditional cutscene. The reason
3D CG and like 3D CG cutscenes.
I don't think they're CG.
Oh, I guess you talked about this when we talked about the story trailer and how you cringed out before you got very far into it.
Okay,
right. So the reason why that's interesting is these developers, other games by these developers, which Globe, which is basically Ender Lilies, I think. I don't know if they had anything else. That game is all like 2D static portraits. So the fact that this game has, these cutscenes, like literally like rendered characters, I think it's pre-rendered. I'm pretty sure it is. Obviously, it's a very different focus in the actual game itself. And the thing is that they feel like from like the PS3 era, which is, it's obviously lower budget. It's not gonna be like a AAA production. I do think some of the cinematography and some of like the color shading and blocking and styling is actually pretty good. It's just that the actual like fidelity of like the animations and the renders themselves feel dated. And so, especially in like facial animation, when a character talks, their like mouth is like statuesque and they're barely moving. So you kind of have to just kind of accept that's what it's like. But overall, there is a style to this game that I think is okay. You can just sort of tell by the color palette in the title. It is a little bit dreary. It's a lot of blacks and grays and browns, some yellows. And so it's not upbeat. It's not poppy. But I do think there's a style to this game that, you may or may dislike. Also, when I was playing through this game, I was like, this localization is surprisingly well done. I wonder who did it. And, this is sort of the thing where you kind of feel validated at the end. And I should have wrote this down as sort of like, it's almost like record. Like I was like, did 8.4 do this? Because this is like really well done. Who did this localization? And turns out it was 8.4. If you're not familiar, 8.4 has done a lot of great English localizations, like the Nier series, Fire Emblem Echoes. They did a lot of Dragalia Lost. They haven't done it recently. They did Batten Kaitos Origin.
Is there are you becoming like a connoisseur of localizations now? Like you kind of get a sense of like as you're playing games, you're kind of getting a sense of like who's doing the localization for them because you've played so many like games, like reading scripts and it feels like some localization companies have like their own certain style of writing, and like you can just kind of feel that after you've played so many of like different games. That like
here, let me look something up in real time here. So the editor was Alan Averill. Okay.
Okay.
Go to Moby Games and look up Alan Averill. Hopefully, whoever does Moby Games updates has kept this up to date. He has done Nier Replicant. He has done Nier Automata editor. Okay. He was the editor on Fire Emblem Awakening, on Xenoblade Chronicles Cross, Dragon's Dogma.
Okay.
Saga Scarlet Grace. Most of those, I would say, have really good localization. Shadow of Valentia, I might have said that already. And then he also back in the day. I guess he must have worked at Nintendo before 8.4. He did work on Fire Emblem Path of Radiance. He worked on Batten Kaitos Origin, which is great localization. I have definitely played games with this person as editor before, and it showed.
The DNA is there,
right?
That's interesting. Because we were talking about this too, like briefly when you were like discussing about Labyrinth Galleria's localization, and like you kind of got a sense of like it's not as up to par as like Labyrinth Refrain.
Well, that was more specifically with the voice acting. I'm like, this voice acting.
Oh yeah,
I wonder who did it. And then what it turns out is the original game Refrain was done by Bang Zoom Studios. The new game Galleria was done by Sentai Studios with completely different stabs and actors. So
yeah, I will say about Galleria, even though I haven't been playing the localization, I've noticed a lot of people say that the story itself, its translation is good, or at least fine. But a lot of the system text, and I've just seen like a few examples, but it's like a lot of the system text is just absolutely like incorrect.
Oh,
the first game had some, but even this game, actually, Redemption Reapers, some of the system text were like, what does this weapon do? Or what does this ability do? It kind of feels not very clear, and it's very weirdly written. But the dialogue for like the story and the characters in this game, I think, is really well done. But yeah, that's it. So the type of game that it's hard for me to recommend it unless, like, if you are the dozens of us who say Thracia 776 is one of the best Fire Emblem games, and maybe give this one a chance, because it's similar in small ways. Anyway.
Is there voice acting in it? I didn't actually check. Yeah. I forgot. Okay.
And the voice acting was done by Cup of Tea by ADR director Kyle McCarley, if you care.
That's, all right. 9S's voice.
Yep.
All right, there we go, child. This has a Japanese voice track.
Yeah, but it's Kyle McCarley.
Oh, I'm
Really?
just saying, I know you like your Japanese voices.
Yeah, but he's actually a better 9S. Sorry, no offense to the Japanese voice actor, but he's a better
It's
9S.
better than Natsuki Hanae. Come on now.
Yeah, he is. No offense. And you know what? Kind of funny. They both play similar roles too. It's like he plays and Natsuki Hanae plays.
Yeah, they both play Alm, right, and 9S in both languages.
Like it's like whatever they do, they both do the same thing.
All right.
Well, thank you, Adam, for giving us a little bit of a look in a little bit of a lower profile game in Redemption Reapers.
Wait, hold on. Before we move on to this, Adam posted a screenshot of like the Japanese voice actors on this project and the English voice actors as well. But why do they have? Why does it have like stack casts in both? Why does this game have Kenjiro Suda and Nana Mizuki and Junfuku? That is so stacked. What the fuck? Okay, I'm sorry. Adam just posted this, and I'm like, all right, all right, Adam.
Richard Epcar. That's a name I haven't heard in a while.
What the fuck?
And Steve Bloom?
I mean, he's everywhere.
I know, but
look,
not typically for games like this.
Yeah, there's kind of like a bombshell that like Adam posted in the 11th hour of this discussion. What the fuck? All right,
that reminds me. This game out anyway.
That reminds me of this. This is not quite related, but I beat Wild Hearts in the last week, and then like the composer was Hamazu. I'm like, oh, like I wasn't expecting that.
Huh.
Yeah.
All right, and now we will transition into our third and last game in our Game Talk section of the podcast here that Colin was really eager to talk about. And we weren't expecting to talk about this game because it is a release from last year, and that is the Chrono Cross Radical Dreamers Edition, the remaster that came out on Switch and PC and PlayStation last year. So one of our news headlines of this week, surprisingly, when no one expected it, is that the official Twitter page for the game was randomly announced that they were going to patch it to give performance improvements. And luckily, this is just a little bit of serendipity here. I believe it was Colin who covered the review for that remaster when it came out last year, specifically the Switch version, specifically how poorly it ran.
I think Colin has some thoughts about this.
I do.
Especially the timing.
I certainly do. I'm glad I get to take the talking stick for this one because Chrono Cross has been present in my life for the last 2 years. Without getting too much into it, I've essentially been making like a big like retrospective on Chrono Cross, and I just recently wrapped up that like project, and my last part was talking about the remaster, which for those of you who do not know, the remaster, while it has a lot of really neat aspects to it, it ran really bad across every single platform, specifically Switch.
Yeah, and also like mentioned like like you were undertaking like a big like a video project for this title for your YouTube channel as well.
Yeah, and so I just made a supercut of all my parts, which is more or less a way for me to say this project is done now. I'm like wrapping it up, no more, and I'm moving on. And as soon as I put this out, I think maybe like 3 days later, Twitter account tweets out, "Yeah, so we're fixing the remaster now." I'm like, oh no, well, for my sake, I hope it's not that fixed so that
it's not
because I literally like I try to not be reactionary when it comes to stuff and be like, this is shit forever and it's doomed and whatever, because that ages poorly. But I do say I think the remaster, despite how much I like it and despite how this will be the version I revisit in future playthroughs, it's a bit mediocre in spots, and it really just comes down to the performance was poor. So now I'm kind of mad that I summoned this balance fix, for lack of a better term, that completely tweaks a bunch of things with it and fixes the performance entirely to such a state where it's not just up to par with the PS1 version, it's completely better. Like, I'd say that...
Colin, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Colin.
Yeah,
you did this.
No,
you did this.
I did manifest it. I have a habit of doing that. It sucks.
So I guess like the very basic breakdown for people who don't know is like the one of the biggest fixes they did with this recent performance patch was like on all the platforms that it released on its remasters, like battles now run at 60 FPS for the Switch version, up to 60 FPS. But they specifically mentioned that the final battle of Chrono Cross on Switch, the Switch version only supports up to 30 FPS. But other than that, like like it's still way better than like it release.
And to add extra context to this, on PS1, the battles in Chrono Cross were very inconsistent performance wise.
Yes.
Like this game was never like when I saw a bunch of people complaining about the performance initially, a lot of this was just like it was kind of always like this. Like it was worse in the remaster if you played with the better
people have
visuals.
already subjected themselves to like, oh, this is the way it was designed. It can't be fixed. It's just like this is the way it was.
Yeah,
you know?
and it really is just like I think when a lot of people said that, we all did, because I was one of them. We all did it under the assumption of no one would go back into this sloppy PS1 code and fix it. No one would
assuming if they even still have the code, because
exactly. But so I cannot we don't know yet what exactly they did to get this to do work this well, because the most fans were able to do in the last year was put out a hex edit that kind of makes it run at 30. Or
there were some fan hacks up to 60, but they're very janky at best. Yeah,
I would say straight up bad. Like a lot of the things that when people are saying just make it 60 FPS, don't understand that for an old game like this, it's not that easy.
A lot of old games run on logic inside the frame rate,
And this was definitely one of those instances, and it's why that I'm pretty sure that's the reason why field segments still run at 30, and it's that if they could do it, they would. But so seeing it now that they've changed it to such a state where it's like battles running at 60 is incredible, because they don't even do that on PS1.
It blows my mind that they did this in the first place. It's just I thought it was one of those things it's just all right, you released it and forgot it, but it's fine, it's preservation, sure, okay, life will go on. But for them to go back and do this is that's just very weird. It's it's not even just that. Adam and I were laughing about it because we were reading the Japanese patch notes for this, and they revamped the whole growth of the pip in that game, and there's just detailed charts upon charts upon charts on the Japanese patch notes of that game of the rebalancing of the growth of the pip, and it's what the fuck are they doing? It's so funny.
When they announced the performance patch, I think I and just about everyone else, all we expected was, okay, get the game running at 30 across the board.
Yeah.
I asked no more than that, truthfully, because that's all I wanted. I hearing fans talk about 60 FPS patch for all of it, when I knew all that would boil down to is making it look really jank and weird. No, you would have to tweak so much, and it would go a lot further than just what a fan could do with mod. And seeing now that they have spent a year working on this and getting it running at 60 for battles when they did not have to do that.
But can you imagine the narrative for this game if this is the launch state of Chrono Cross, right? If this
it would have been incredible.
It's just one of those things. It's it kind of makes me a little frustrated, because this is something I really wanted to get excited about when it came out, because Chrono Cross is a very divisive game, but I always appreciated it for what it tried to do, and I'm usually more positive than most people. But seeing it in that state last year when it launched, I was like, man,
I despise this game, but I'm glad to see patches like these. It's nobody wants to see their game being shit on from performance issues. So
yeah, I'm glad they finally they redeemed it.
Yeah.
Does this affect Radical Dreamers in any way?
I don't think so. There wasn't much to fit.
Yeah,
that re-release of Radical Dreamers is great.
The PC version of Radical Dreamers might have just been my specific setup, and I don't know why, but the menu that you access to go into Radical Dreamers, for some reason it just sucked. It chugged, it barely moved, and then as soon as I got into the game it was fine, but the menu before it was just terrible. So hopefully
interesting.
Might have just been my.
It's not 60 FPS for you.
Yeah, I will say I also, because I had to replay Radical Dreamers on PC to get footage for it. I never had that issue, but
yeah, and I know Brian didn't, or no, not Brian. Watching someone else play it, and they didn't have the issues. It's just kind of I don't know, whatever.
But I just, as one of Chrono Cross's strongest soldiers, I'm so it feels good. It feels very vindicating, even if now I'm looking over at this this video project, just kind of oh, if I had literally waited a week, I could have made an addendum and it just evergreen video. But I'm just as soon as this got announced, it was just oh, that's awesome. And then as I booted it up on my Switch, saw how perfect it was running, and immediately bought the physical copy.
There you go.
Just immediate. I was like,
Mhm.
okay, cool. I don't feel ashamed to own this now.
That's great.
you'll still need to patch it.
Version, or is it like from like Asia?
Yeah, I think it's the Asian English
Okay.
version.
But you'll still be version 1.0. It's like imagine the.
I mean, you could still
in the
update it.
future. Be like,
It's good for preservation's sake, so he always has the option to, always revisit the legacy of Chrono Cross when it first launched.
But I'm so pleased about this is that before this, Chrono Cross Radical Dreamers Edition was just kind of universally considered one of the weaker Square remasters. Like a lot of people did like what they did. Like I personally, I love all the new visuals. I love what they did with the backgrounds, all of that stuff. It is like the only thing in the way for me was performance.
Mhm.
And now that this has been fixed, I think this is one of their best remasters. Like they flipped it so quickly and out of nowhere. And I'm beaming over here.
That's ongoing support. Let's put it on the board.
Yeah, ongoing. We put it on our best remaster category for our last game of the year, and we just kind of had to easily knock it
Immediately
off.
knock it
Now we're like, well,
I have to say though, because I'm wondering, they did not have to do this. It's great.
It was
that
very
they
out of
did.
nowhere. It was very out of there. It was a very welcome surprise. I think.
So it makes me wonder, okay, you made it a big deal to fix the Chrono thing. Are you guys working on any other Chrono things that you felt this was a big enough deal to go back to?
Chrono break, guys. It's happening.
I honestly,
I think this is wishful thinking.
like, it is wishful thinking, totally. But also, yeah, more.
They're gonna release Chrono Break. It's gonna run at 15 FPS inconsistently at launch, and they'll fix it a year later.
That's Kato's vision. I'll take it.
Wow.
But no, it just leads me excited, I guess. I really
Yeah.
like if there's more, great. If there's not, I can just be happy that one of my favorite games now has the remaster it deserves. So yeah, no, if anyone's interested in Chrono Cross, this is the time to jump in.
It'll feel good if they get around to adding Chrono Cross music into Theatrhythm. I know they'll do. I think they're doing
yeah.
Chrono Trigger, but I don't know if they're doing Chrono Cross.
I think it's both.
Okay,
Yeah, I think it's both. Yeah.
I can go double check. But man, what
I mean, it better be both because Chrono Cross's soundtrack is better.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's not a hot take. That's I think pretty common.
what do you think, Chow?
Is it time for me to like this game now? Oh, not happening.
I'm just saying. What do you think? Chrono Trigger OST better or worse than Chrono Cross OST for you, Chow?
Okay, that Chrono Cross is like literally the god perfection OST there is. So you can't beat it. Even if the game is trash, the music is god tier. You can't beat that music. That's like
Small aside.
very. That's like a David versus Goliath battle right here.
I didn't mention when I was talking about Redemption Reapers. Redemption Reapers has like a stupid good soundtrack at times. It almost feels like undeserving of it in ways. It's just kind of like, why?
Why?
There's lots of good games with. There's lots of like trash.
I mean, I don't think
games with
Redemption Reapers is a bad game. I don't think it's a great game. It's an interesting game, perhaps. It's just like
Out in the middle.
really, really hard at times.
Shadow in the middle of games, like you didn't have to pop off like this.
Okay,
Why can't you just be mediocre throughout? Jesus.
yeah, I'm saying there is trash games with god tier soundtracks like Dawn of Mana. It has the best Mana soundtrack of all the Mana games.
I don't want to has a pretty good music. All right.
Chow's like, I will dislike Chrono Cross on its own merits, not because of the port.
It's like everything about this game is fundamentally flawed to me. It's like this is like me with Josh with Chain Echoes of how much I despise this game.
All right, little Chow. Okay, I get it now. Okay, I understand.
I like how we're building up like Tetracast lore with the this stuff. Well, no, thank you. I'm glad that we were able to get Colin on not only to talk about obviously Octopath Traveler 2, but because obviously without Colin, we were going to report on the patch anyways because it's one of our news topics. But to actually go in and see that Colin tried it out, was so impressed to buy the physical copy.
Thank you for saving Chrono Cross, Colin.
You're welcome. I'm glad my misery is able to benefit the Chrono Cross landscape. I was so impressed. For some reason, I have no idea why, because I reviewed it for us on Switch, and I booted into Switch on my OLED, and my save was gone. I don't know if that game just doesn't have cloud saves or what, but then I was like, oh, dang, you're saying I have to restart Chrono Cross? Heck, I guess I will. So I'm playing through it again with this patch, and I'm like, I might just replay this entire game.
I remember like this was like a big talking, like even before like the Radical Dreamers edition came out, like you shared like some before release, you shared some videos of you like, dude, what the fuck is up with the frame rate of this mouse?
It was so bad.
And, like I saw it, I'm like, holy shit, you gotta be kidding me. This is no way, right?
Like
This is no way.
It was so bad on Switch that I had people after my review say I was trying to like hate on the Switch and like lie that they were like, no, don't you see?
Colin, resident Switch hater, obviously.
Yeah, literally, I will take the biggest L's ever just to play a game portable though. Like, and it's gotten to the point where it's like, I'll be real, I prefer playing my Switch over my Steam Deck.
Okay.
It's just more comfy.
The same way too.
It's lighter. I like it more. I'll look at two versions, and even if the Switch version is like way worse running, I'm like, but I want it on Switch though.
Like, I mean, at the end of the day, you want to feel comfortable playing the game.
Exactly.
So it doesn't matter.
I have really fragile arms. Okay, I can't hold the Steam Deck for more than 30 minutes. Okay.
Like, but I had people telling me that I was trying to like put out like basically a hit piece on the Switch, and they were like, "Don't you see? It's trash on all the other systems, idiot." I'm like, okay, but you're not seeing what I'm playing.
Are they gonna say the same thing with the Symphonia part too? It's trash on all systems too.
It's okay. In a year, Bandai Namco is gonna make it the best fucking.
Apparently, they're working on a patch.
Have you heard about this? Like, part of the reason why the Symphonia remastered port like runs like shit on Switch is because the upscaling on Colette's wings is like it's fucking up the performance.
Yeah, I heard.
Dude,
Like,
that's so sick.
Into it too.
I saw there was like a headline: "How to fix the Switch performance issues for Tales of Symphonia? Take Colette out of the party."
And that's fucked up. And Colette is like one of the best, if not the best, like early game character.
I
fucked up.
To add into the Symphonia a little bit, I'm playing it like more or less for the first time on Switch right now. I'm covering that for Insider at the moment. You really don't need to play that remaster to completion to know what's wrong with it. It is immediate. And as someone from a coding background, I'm not sure if you will allow me to like kind of
go for it,
nerd out a little bit.
Yeah.
So the surface level take on what's wrong with Symphonia is that the effects are broken, and that's correct. Like, battle transitions don't work as intended. I don't know if you guys talked about this last week. I'm sorry I didn't have a chance to listen.
Briefly went over it, but no one really like got a chance to get their hands onto it. We just heard like, the secondhand reporting.
So it is that every time you go into a battle, what it would do was it would freeze frame, crack the screen, break it, then fade into battle with like a white fade in. What it does now on Switch, and this is only on Switch. We could talk about load times being bad across the remaster, which is true. The load times aren't great, but I'll be honest, I've never been the type to hate load times because I could just do something else. But I get it. This is the problem. This is way worse. Where what it'll do when you hit a battle, it'll flash a black frame, flash a white frame, and then fade in. It hurts my eyes.
Oh no, that seems bad.
It's bad. Also, if you pause the game, what it is supposed to do is kind of over top of what you're doing, kind of show the menu on top of that. What it does now is black frame, all the menus are on top of a black frame.
What the fuck?
When you do the skits, same thing.
No way.
Black frame over top of that. So I was noticing a connecting factor on all of these, and it's that it seems to be that what the intent is it's supposed to be kind of, I'm looking at this from a coding perspective, just assuming it. I'm not looking into it, but if you work with code enough, you can kind of like start to piece the debug process in your mind. What I think what Symphonia is trying to do in that instance is it takes a screenshot, keeps it in temporary data of what you're currently doing. So if you pause the game, if you go into a skit, if you go into a battle, in all of those instances, it takes a screenshot and applies an effect on it. It seems like the screenshot part of it is broken, so it errors out.
Or the effect is just like being applied improperly, where it's like you're supposed to see what you're doing, foggy in the background. Nope, black.
Well, no, I think it's just that the screenshot just doesn't work.
Oh, okay.
Because it has no image to apply the effect on so it errors out and you get nothing. So there's nothing, because what I'm pretty sure, like on the Switch version, what it's supposed to be doing for battles, for instance, is like, and you can just play any other version to see this. It'll take the effect, like the screenshot, apply the shatter effect. Behind that, it will have the white screen. So when the shatter effect happens and it breaks through, you get the white screen and then it fades in to the battle. But because it can't apply that effect, you get a black image, like a black nothing over the, like black nothing, no effect, immediately cut that out. You have a white thing and then that fades in. It just seems like something is like that exact effect is broken, and it broke a lot of effects with it. And I don't know how this launched in this state.
One thing that Scott mentioned also, so this game is from like 2006 or 5 or something, right? So it's not like gonna have like really high cinematic values, like cinematic, fidelity anyways. But in the original release, it at least did like transitions between like scenes where like one scene would fade into the other if like a camera was changing or whatnot. You get what I mean?
Yes.
But apparently in this version, it just is hard cuts. So like camera pans over a character, then just like hard cut to the other character on the other side or whatever. Just like, just how it does the cinematics is just like even worse than what it was before.
And that might have to do with the same thing. I'm not entirely sure how that works, but I've seen it too. So they've announced in the Japanese side they're putting out a patch. We have no idea how long that will take.
It's just like unacceptable that it launched at this state. Like it's just frankly disgusting.
Yeah, no.
How much are they charging for this? $40? Yeah, God.
It's $55 Canadian on our side.
Jesus.
I could find a physical copy of it, but I couldn't find a physical copy of Octopath 2.
I have decided I'm done playing this until it improves.
Oh yeah, I mean it's already hard on your eyes when every time you fucking go into a battle, it's not worth it.
No,
all right,
yeah. So
all you got to do is put together a Tales retrospective. And
no, absolutely not. I'm not.
Okay, Colin. How about let's save another re-release then. Apparently, the re-release of Legendary Dragoon on PlayStation 4 and 5, or just 5, I forgot.
Also bad.
Yeah, also fucking bad, and a really completely broken state on its re-release, because that's, I guess, a hot new trend these days. So apparently, I don't like. It's getting a lot of the really bad visual artifacts, like emulation visual artifacts. And also, like, apparently there's just some random spells that like hard lock the game all over. And then there's like just audio bugs, and then some voice lines have just been randomly cut out in it. So, another classic JRPG re-released onto a modern platform that just completely borked. And who knows when that's getting fixed. Doubly so,
Probably
because
won't.
It's fucking Sony.
Yeah, like that's the thing.
Fucking Sony.
Like a lot of those like emulated like re-releases, like especially the PS2, were just completely broken on PS4 and PS5, and they just never got fixed.
Apparently, they updated like the European like releases. Like the refresh rate has been like, those were like patched into like the NA standard refresh rates. Like I think early on, if I remember correctly. But I don't know if they're gonna get around to fixing this.
I don't expect them to. I'm gonna be real. I used to like really care about these like re-releases they do, especially for these old PS1 games. DuckStation is so easy. I'm sorry.
Yeah. You're not wrong. I mean, it's like, why would you take the time and effort to spend the fucking money for an infinitely worse experience?
People want those trophies, okay? They want to brag about their achievements. Hey, look, I killed this boss at level 1. Look.
All right, well they can have it if they really fucking go through a worse game experience.
I spent years waiting for a Vagrant Story re-release, so I decided to just play it on DuckStation, and I'm like, yeah, no, I just got the experience basically 1-to-1 as it was intended. So if a Vagrant Story re-release comes out and it sucks, then it's like, well, glad I didn't wait.
Yeah, I mean, these things only get easier if you're not gonna find if this is what you're gonna be putting out and charging money for, then fuck no, dude. Hell no.
Yeah, honestly, like this whole conversation has just like really like solidified the fact that this industry just does not have enough respect for its like history.
Well, just look at Jim Ryan.
Yeah, it's like all credit to Square for fixing Chrono Cross, but it shouldn't have launched in that state to begin with. Like, it's just God.
I really like, there's not just for, old games, there's just like for modern releases as well. Like we were just talking about Wild Hearts the other weekend.
By
it
the
was
way,
like-
that Wo Long demo launched, and that thing that I reported to the devs about the same issue that Wild Hearts had at launch that I reported over a month and a half ago is still a problem in the demo, even though they already fixed it in the engine for Wild Hearts.
you guys try out the Wild Hearts patch? Do you have any update on like whether that Wild Hearts patch?
It's still, I can play it on my desktop. That game still does not run nearly as well as it should, considering it still looks worse than Monster Hunter World.
Yeah, so yeah, I also
I was streaming that game and I was watching it, and for me it runs okay, like frame rate wise. I think my GPU is just brute forcing it. But then I was talking to some NPCs, and they did not spawn in with their clothes and head, so they were just like a naked mannequin, just talking to me, telling me that somebody which monster to go hunt, and I'm like, neat.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, I was watching Brian stream, and I just looked over and I'm like, "What are you playing?"
But yeah, it's just and then you're charging how much for this game? It's just like, man, come on. Like I get it. Video game development is fucking insanely hard, but this can't be the day one experience that we always have to get used to. Like, oh, I guess we'll just wait for the patch and hopefully it'll get better.
It especially pisses me off because it's like, one, you could say, oh well, they didn't catch this in QA or like something like that with the RDNA 3 stuff, but it's like it feels a little bit different when you know specifically that the devs knew about it for at least a month, and it's like
painting with a broad brush. There are enough devs that are vocal enough on social media across all developers and publishers of many sizes. Almost all the time, QA did see it, but they just decide that their ship date is more important, or they don't have the resources to correct it. And I want to paint with too broad a brush. So there might be like certain things where they're like, yeah, that's low on the totem pole, we can't get that. But when it's
there has to be a breaking point at some point. Like people can't be. We cannot just normalize. Hey, we just expect a broken experience at launch, and then we'll just expect a performance patch to just fix it up later, and not just the standard normal thing to do now. Like, just do not like this modern landscape of like, yeah, the day one experience is going to be fucking shit, and just deal with it until they get around to fixing it, I guess.
Like with me and
sorry.
I was gonna like, because I've been playing Ishin on PC, I have had to refund that.
Oh really? Wow.
Oh my god, the stuttering.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's crazy. Legend 4 game on PC.
Yeah, I had stuttering issues, but I was like, it's a I guess my GPU was like, eventually brute forced it.
It's more of a CPU thing. Don't you have like a 5800X? I think
5900X.
Oh yeah, but 59. That would explain it, because it's like if it, you're still gonna have the stutters, but like the better your CPU is, the less.
Yeah, I even mentioned in my review, like I experienced some stutters, and that kind of dragged down my experience. But like on my setup, like it was only minor. I didn't know that people were having much worse stuttering issues on their end for that game.
Such a bad state right now.
They have said that they are patching it.
There you go.
That's another thing that's inexcusable. How many Unreal Engine 4 releases have come out and people have complained about the shader compilation issues? It's not a new issue. It's been going on for like over a year. Everyone's complained about it. Digital Foundry has complained about it. They just had a Hi-Fi Rush where the developers outright said, because they knew that it was a problem, that they went through the effort of making damn sure that the shaders were compiled on first boot, so you didn't have that stuttering. And you know what? That game were perfectly fine, even though it's an Unreal Engine 4 title. It's just, I'm just going to say it. If you release a PC version of a game that's on Unreal Engine 4 and has shader compilation stutters in 2023, you deserve all the shit you're going to get, deservedly, for not putting enough effort into making sure that game runs right.
Yeah, I mean, there's already so many there's a long list of like cases before you, right? Like, once again, there's gonna be a breaking point, and like people are just be like, "What? Fuck this, dude! Like, what the fuck are we doing?"
In general, this feels a little bit like deja vu. Like in the last month, we're talking about, well, Forspoken runs poorly, but hey, they're patching it. Ishin runs poorly. Well, hey, they're patching it. Wild Hearts runs poorly, but hey, they're going to be patching it.
You know what? I want to Wolong even.
It might be Wolong next too.
Yeah,
it is, because like, even if it's not stuttering, it's just the RDNA 3 issues, and then there's shader compilation. I do want to say something positive. I put up a preview for Ryza 3, Atelier Ryza 3, earlier this week, and I know we're going to talk about it later, but I just want to come out. This is a good point to say it. that PC version is really fucking good. Like, I didn't put it in the preview article because it wasn't really a good spot to put it, but I tweeted out like the options menu on PC. That game runs really, really well. It has a ton of graphical settings, and it's like, thank God.
We're gonna start giving bonus points and extra credit to like it's like, hey, you fucking launched like a pretty stable.
Thank you, Gust.
That's crazy. Extra credit.
It's especially crazy because like Gust used to be terrible for their PC ports, even for Koei Tecmo standards. Because like Koei Tecmo, like I don't know if you remember this, but back when like Total Biscuit was alive, he would always like rip into Koei Tecmo for having the worst PC ports because they were like 30 FPS cap. They would be based off the PS3 version instead. The PS4 version was just a total nightmare. And then Gust was even worse. And now it's like flipped where Gust is making, but frankly, is probably one of the best PC ports of the last several years, which is insane.
So I looked into this because I was playing Ishin with a friend while I like who saw me refund it in real time because I got to a crucial cutscene in the opening chapter. And then it started stuttering. I was like, "No, I'm not doing the whole game."
Yeah, don't deal with it. Fuck it, dude.
But and then I booted into another game that had several months of patches where I saw massive stuttering on launch. Then I said, "I will give them time." And this game is Star Ocean: The Divine Force. I just looked into it. Unreal Engine 4.
Yep.
It's
that
not
game
Unreal
is
Engine 4. It's their own in-house engine, but they do precompile shaders.
Google says Unreal Engine 4. I don't know.
Yeah, I thought it was Unreal Engine also.
No, I'm pretty sure it
Star Ocean.
But anyway, regardless, I booted that up after months of like waiting to see if they got that together because again, unplayable on PC. Like the stuttering is terrible. It's so bad. And for an open world game,
even with like I've tried to go through like an extra effort of like compiling shaders on first boot and then having the option in game menu to like to recompile them again. Like you can kind of iron it out, but there is still, issues for sure even going through like the steps of doing it.
That's wild because I never had stuttering issues on Star Ocean. Precompile just worked for me.
I was running around like not even the world map, a town, and it was stuttering like crazy. And I'm just I
know Brian had to like do like the option, the in-game option recompile again to iron it all out finally.
I had to do it. I had to do it a few times, then eventually it's going to clear out
multiple times.
Maybe I just need to buy a better CPU, but like mine's not even that old.
Yours is from 2019, and it's a 6-core CPU. Like it's fine, but it's weaker than the CPUs in the current gen consoles. So it
still feels shitty though that like he has to even for like lower powered like graphically lower powered games. Like it's like they're still going through this issue. Like even though even if his specs meet them.
Yeah, like Star Ocean and Ishin are at their core like PS4 games. Like let's be real.
Yeah.
So it sucks. It just fucking sucks across the board. And it feels like some developers kind of use DLSS and other AI upscaling methods to kind of like they're kind of relying those as crutches to like kind of get their performance by some extent, which fucking sucks as well. Like, hey, we're gonna kind of like skip on like optimizing this to kind of rely on this method to maybe get it across the finish line. It's like, fuck, man.
Yeah,
what are we doing here? What are we doing?
It's a nightmare because it's so many aspects of PC gaming right now are like the best they've ever been. Like it's like the best time if you're like building or upgrading a PC. Like there's actual competition in CPU space. Like AMD and Intel are on like a fucking slugfest. Like just being like, hey, here's a new like super fast gaming CPU. Here's another one. Here's like a discounts so you can get like a new CPU set up like really cheap. Then there's like NVMe drives, like SSDs, cheapest they've ever been, all really good quality. Like the actual PC building experience, except for graphics cards, is like really, really good. But then the actual games, where it's like, yeah, not every game on PC is going to have that issue, but it seems like it's damn near 95% of the time that you're going to play an Unreal Engine 4 game on PC, which, spoiler alert, that's most of the games coming out these days. It's just going to be a complete and utter nightmare.
Oh, we live in hell right now. That's what I think.
I like how we went from Chrono Cross Remastered Edition to Tales of Symphonia to all the recent releases. Yeah, we did that, and now we're done.
I'm sorry for changing the subject, Alder. but I guess
Look, man, it has to be said, okay? Because it's been that's kind of been the trend of 2023, okay? From Forspoken to Wild Hearts to Ishin to whatever Wolong next to whatever next. It's just like I feel like it's just gonna be just a constant thing this year, and it's gonna fucking suck. It's gonna fucking suck.
I'm bracing myself for that Fatal Frame remake remaster thing.
And it's gonna fucking stutter.
I
Like I feel like if I look.
Well, do you want me to help you find out what CPU you might want to upgrade to?
I was literally going to ask you. I have one in mind. I wanted to run it by you.
All right.
Actually, I have two in mind.
Look, man, I'm just looking at the Steam front page right now. Like, let me see. Digimon World Next Order. Is it gonna stutter? How about this Pocky and Rocky Reshrine? Is that gonna stutter?
I've heard nothing about that Digimon.
It's a $60 release for a game that's like 4 years old or something.
No, but I haven't even seen reviews on that.
7 years old, I think.
I don't think they sent out codes for it.
Reviews are very positive, but it's Digimon fans. Is there
I mean, for Steam reviews, yeah.
Yeah, apparently it runs really well on Steam Deck, so that's something.
There you go. No stutters. All right, we have a champion.
But how does it run on Switch?
It was originally a Vita game. It better damn well run, all right.
Yeah, I mean, at least like almost a decade ago, so you can go find that. I don't know if this
$60
I don't know if this has a Switch version. I think it has a Switch version, but I don't remember.
Yeah,
it does. It's Switch and Steam releases for this.
I searched stutter and stuttering on the games discussions board, and I'm not finding anything. So
all right, let's go. We're in. We're in. All right, I'm a Digimon fan now.
Well, we're about 2 hours in, and we've covered all the games that we're going to be covering for this week's version of the podcast. So we'll go from here into pulling out a few features that are up on the site, though a lot of them we have kind of covered incidentally already. And then going into the news, which for this week is mostly release dates, as we're kind of filling out the release schedule for March and April. Cullen, if you want to stick around, you're free to. Otherwise, I'll let you go at this point.
I think this, unfortunately, is when I do have to bow out. This was really great. I'm glad I got to talk about Chrono Cross and Octopath.
Yeah. And stuttering.
Yes.
Yeah. Also fun.
But
okay.
But yeah, so thanks for having me, and I hope you have a good rest of the cast.
Yeah, have a good one, Colin.
Take care.
Later, Colin.
Bye-bye.
All right, for all the features that are up on the site, most of these have been, or at least a couple of them have been talked about already. Ellen obviously did the Octopath Traveler 2 review. If the 1 hour discussion that we had wasn't enough, we have the written review up on the site as well. James did talk about his Atelier Ryza 3 preview, and I mentioned specifically you're only talking about the PC performance, or in the earlier conversation. You mentioned that was kind of a very small footnote or not even present in your preview. So I guess here's a chance to speak to any other aspects of Ryza 3 that you feel is in need of calling out before it's released next month.
I think it's when I wrote my Ryza 2 review, the kind of through line through it was the game was so good after only like a year after Ryza 1 that I really wanted to see what Gus could do with a bit of a longer development cycle for Ryza 3. So naturally, that's happened. It's been 2 years since Ryza 3, and while Gust still made other games, I'm pretty sure that they have like different teams within Gust, and the Ryza team has just been working on Ryza 3 since 2021 when Ryza 2 released. At first, I wasn't sure how major changes were to the game, because it's one of those things where it's like, it's been a while since I played Ryza 1 and 2. It's like, oh, is that new, or did I just forget about it? One thing that stood out to me, and then I had to go back and make sure I wasn't going crazy, was that in Ryza 1 and 2, while the world itself was decently big and there was like, you could kind of explore and whatnot, there was loading zones. Like you would reach, like, head right up to a cave, and at the mouth of the cave, you would press a button to transition into the cave, or to go out of the cave, or if there's like some ruins, you transition from different parts of the ruins and whatnot. Ryza 3 is, with a few exceptions, like only a few, is completely open world. Like even some of the same areas from Ryza 1, and I assume Ryza 2 eventually, because like one of the advertisements is that there's 4 regions, and one of the regions is a Ryza 1 region, and they've shared screenshots that are Ryza 2 areas, it looks like. Yeah, it's like even the areas that had like loading zones in Ryza 1, it's just nope, totally seamless. They've even added like extra like parts of the geography to like more seamlessly like connect these two areas together and make the world feel like a more seamless experience. And it's kind of insane because it's like, I mean, Gus isn't a big company, but you'd think that taking what are segmented sections of a world map and then just retrofitting them to make them an open world, it couldn't have been easy, right?
For me, like whether a game like if it's a new IP, whether it has like wide linear zones or is truly open world, I feel like I can take it either way. I don't really have a preference. But the idea of playing the third game in a series and going through like some familiar areas, but now they're connected, seems like that'd be a pretty neat experience. To be like, oh wow, I can go straight from here to here when I couldn't do that before.
Yeah, and definitely like it makes the overall like scope of the game feel a little bit bigger, which is something that Ryza 2 already did pretty well with its like ruined dungeons and whatnot. They all had like pretty big scope and whatnot. The major change with Ryza 3 that they've been advertising is the secret key system, where you have access to the hollow key, which you can use during battles to kind of like copy an enemy's attributes to make a key you can then use either to buff yourself in battles or to use while doing synthesis, so for item creation. And it's kind of hard to just explaining it would be a bit difficult, especially if you're not already familiar with Ryza 1 and 2. But it's very interesting so far. Like, I'm curious to see how it will evolve over time, like how much deeper it can get. But even just from like the opening hours, it's really neat to just have that little extra wrinkle in synthesis. And it's like, oh wow, it's like now it's not just you're not just interested in finding out which materials you can like gather from different parts of the environment, but it's like, oh, what can I get from these different enemies I find? Like I find this unique enemy, what can I get from using making a key off of them and stuff like that. And then there's like portions of the environment where there might be like magical barriers that require a key of a specific type or a specific attribute to get past, and you can use each key limited number of times. So you have to consider, okay, do you want to use this to buff yourself in battle primarily? Do you want to use it in synthesis? Do you want to use it for exploration? And so on and so forth. I've been enjoying my time with it so far. Obviously, limited what I can say from the preview, but yeah, I'm excited to see what the rest of the game is like.
Well, it's nice. It's nice to see that your expectations, based on the fact I had forgotten that Ryza 2 came out a year after Ryza 1, and you still thought very highly of that. And now with Ryza 3, it seems like you kind of calibrated your expectations. Be like, all right, now they've had an extra year. Did they deliver something even greater? And it sounds like, based on your experience so far, the answer is yeah. They're nailing it again. So it just seems like a very solid trilogy all around. A couple other features that are up on the site. This one we'll probably just talk about very briefly because Adam went at length about this game a week or so ago. He wrote up his review for Labyrinth of Galleria, the Moon Society. This is obviously the NIS dungeon crawler that came out earlier in the month. Adam, I know you've spoken at length about Labyrinth of Galleria. I don't know if you want to kind of staccato anything here with the interview going up on the site.
I don't know if this is a bit mean-spirited, but I watched the ending, like the true ending to Galleria, and I was just kind of like, okay, sure. And then I went on YouTube and I was like, let me watch the ending to Labyrinth of Refrain again, just to remind myself what it was. And then I started watching it and I started crying. I'm like, okay, one of these games had more of an effect on me than the other. So
I am curious, and I guess maybe spoiler tag this in the like podcast thing. How long did it take you to get through that post-game final dungeon?
A day.
Like how many hours? Like
I don't know, 5.
Okay, so
it was like one evening.
Yeah, when it came out in Japan, they didn't used to be that the spawn rate for the elevators was much, much lower. And I was actually talking with a friend of mine in another server where she went through it and she basically found an elevator like once every 7 or 10 floors. In the Japanese version, you would probably go over 100 floors without finding a single elevator. And it was a lot longer. which I can understand how that would be a slog, but I feel like in my case, it definitely made the catharsis of the ending kind of hit a bit more, because it's like, oh no, like the slog was part of it. It's like you're supposed to feel like you're like beating your head against the wall to get that happy ending. So I don't know. It's just a thing where I think, I wonder if that's impacted how people feel about the ending, even if it's just a little bit.
But
Yeah. I've been hearing from a friend that like post game, it doesn't seem like it's taken him that long to complete either. He completed it, I think, earlier today or yesterday, and he's just, I don't know. He's pretty frustrated about the game as a whole too. When it comes to like his experience with Refrain compared to what experience in Galleria, I think a lot of the proc gen stuff really made him sour on it.
like, I don't know, like, this doesn't sound like, like, just to go through like all that struggle to make the ending more worth it. I don't know. It sounds kind of like too much repetition to be earned. I don't know. Doesn't sound kind of enjoyable.
I mean, I don't know. That's not my place to say, because it's sort of definitely for people who are moment to moment playing it. There's no way you or I can relate at the moment, Cha, because we haven't had that experience.
I just don't know like how this is like better to be going through this mess. So
like they hear that like the final post game dungeon had like that many floors. I won't say how much here, but like it's like, wait, it's not much. It's like, oh all right, I guess. Shit.
One thing I definitely noticed though is that like in the original, like in the Japanese version, I'm not sure if you ran into this in the localization, but once you reach that final dungeon, because of how big it is, like as you go further and further into it, the types of equipment you can find gets stronger and stronger exponentially, to the point where once you're at the post-game final dungeon, it's like, it doesn't matter what your like soul clarity is for your units pretty much, because the equipment's going to matter so much more by then. And
yeah, I saw one of the equipment. It was like basically this Gaia numbers at that point, pretty much.
Yeah, but it's like I had a friend where she was like, I can't deal with this final boss. And it's like, okay, you said you only went through that final dungeon in about 3 hours. I would just, the last couple of floors of that dungeon, just try and gather as much equipment as you can and see if that'll help boost your like units, and was enough to push them over the finish line. So it's like, I don't know. Again, I'm not saying it was wrong to change it, because objectively it was a slog. Like, some people aren't going to be happy with that. Obviously, some people were very upset with it. But I felt like when I played through it, it's like, yes, this is a slog, but it knows it's a slog and it was done deliberately. And I actually kind of respect that, because like for the narrative, it feels like it fits better. And maybe it's copium, but I can only talk about my own experience. And I appreciated the fact that it was like, oh, that's ballsy, and you actually went for it. You didn't have to. And it doesn't even feel like padding, because the game's already as long as it is. It just was like, no, we're going to do this. And it's like, if you want that happy ending, you better grind for it. I don't know.
I think it's a difficult thing to pull off, and that it'll range wildly, very wildly. People, it'll either hit or it won't, And if it doesn't, then a lot of people will sour on that feeling.
Well, sometimes when games want to inconvenience the player deliberately, some people will appreciate what the outcome is, and some people will only. It depends not only on the person, but on the way the game presents it.
Yeah,
whether they see the inconvenience.
Save file and you'll love it.
Yeah. But no, thank you, Adam. Obviously, we have the previous episode of Tetracast where we talk about Galleria at length and Adam's thoughts on it, but we also do have the written thoughts of Labyrinth and Galleria, Moon Society, up on rpgsite.net. The last feature that we have up on the site before we go into the news is back in December, we held a Final Fantasy series poll. This is something that we've done approximately every 5 years for maybe, I think, 15 years now. I forget exactly when it was first started, but we ran the poll again in December of 2022 and compared it to the results that we had at the series 30th anniversary from 2018, right when, I believe it was 2017, right after Final Fantasy 15 had released. And all the results are up on the feature up on the site. And these include what the best Final Fantasy title is, what the best Final Fantasy protagonist is, the poll respondents' first Final Fantasy, and then a few other things like favorite spin-off series and things like that. I don't know if there's any very clear, specific thing that is worthy of being called out here in the podcast. There's a few obvious ones, like compared to 5 years ago, Final Fantasy 14 rated much higher, and I think that's kind of like a very expected outcome based on the reception of Stormblood, Shadowbringers, and Endwalker. Final Fantasy 15 did fall a bit. Final Fantasy 7 is still at the top. Final Fantasy 9 is still at the top 3 as well. The one thing that I thought in these in-depth results that was the most interesting is that Final Fantasy 6 scored the best for being people's not first Final Fantasy. Let me see how it's exactly worded in the article. Where was that?
Basically, the percentage of people who rated Final Fantasy VI as their favorite had the lowest percentage of them also rating it as their first.
Raja. Despite how beloved it is, Final Fantasy VI seems like it is a game that is discovered late. Only 21% of people who said it was their favorite also said it was their first. So basically,
percentage is usually much higher.
Yeah,
that makes some sense because I feel like 6 is that one game in the series, along with 9, where everyone's like, "Yeah, this is one of the best ones." So it's like you get into Final Fantasy, you ask people, "Hey, which one should I also play?" They're like 6, 7, and 9.
Yeah,
there you go.
Easy.
And obviously,
I think the reason why it's not everyone's first because if they grew up in the Super Nintendo era, they probably started with 4 first instead of 6. So, it's usually like that.
So obviously, this was
you have to consider. You have to consider, like the whole, the way that Final Fantasy was released in the West on the SNES.
And this is what I was going to bring up was that this is an RPG site poll for an English-facing audience for whatever our demographic is, which I don't know what that is. I'm assuming mostly older players, so people who started with the games on the PlayStation 1 era. It might explain why 1, 2, and 3 are so far down on the list. Obviously, for an English-speaking audience, so games like 3 probably never stood a chance because those haven't been available officially in English outside of the DS version and the recent Pixel remaster. So, of course, it is a poll that is limited by the conduit in which it was conducted. But
Europe never got Final Fantasy till 7.
Yeah.
So it's like a little bit screwed for the results. So, but it is how it is.
Well, we can still compare like to like how our poll results from our same website were 5 years ago versus today, and then look at the remaining results in the context of how the poll.
All I'm saying, it's criminal that Furion was ranked last place in best FF protagonist, even under Vaughn. Oh, come on.
Don't
what are we doing?
Baldur's lies, okay?
What are we doing? I'm just saying, as a society, I thought our audience was better than this. I mean, like he has to be. He is the protagonist. He is the face of that game. It's not.
No, it's not fair, guys. He's a true leading man.
Sorry, but Vaughn is the protagonist of that game technically. But you're gonna rank him above Furion?
Come on. I think by now that enough of our audience would have been conditioned into saga enjoyers that I don't know.
I feel very, very conflicted about it. I saw that, I'm like, times are changing, I guess.
No, we should do the spin-off, official spin-off.
Oh god, spin-offs would be a fucking shit show, dude. It would be crazy.
It won't be a shit show. It'll be Final Fantasy Tactics will take all the claims of titles.
It gets into the weeds of like, what do you consider a spin-off? Why isn't my favorite spin-off that like barely 2 people have heard of understand? Where's Crystal Bearers? Yeah. Where's
Lael? If we're talking about best Final Fantasy protagonist, where's Lael or Jack?
Where's
Benjamin?
That's right.
Here's a hot take for me. So the second place, the first place FF protagonist is Cloud. I don't think that's surprising, especially considering the remasters and remake series that's going on right now. But in second place was Terra from Final Fantasy VI, and you could also argue like, who is the protagonist of Final Fantasy VI? Yeah, Terra's on the cover art. Who was
the Dissidia representative? That's the only way you can find out is who's the Dissidia representative.
Oh wow, I didn't realize that Antoto and Xenos, I guess, are the protagonists of 11 and 14 respectively.
Yes.
Yeah, but I was watching. So I've played Final Fantasy VI, but it's been like 15 years. I was watching someone else play through the Pixel remaster because that released in February of last year, and Terra for like 70% of the game just lets things happen to her. Like she's very passive. And I think that's kind of what the story is meant to be, but I don't think it makes her a great protagonist. For me, like my hot take is I wouldn't put Terra second on this list because for most of the
trying to get people to fucking kill us here. All right.
Yeah, I almost wrote something up when I finished 6 in 2021 where it was like, I think the strongest biggest strength that 6 actually has is that it doesn't really have a main protagonist, but rather every character feels like the protagonist of their own story that kind of just like work together, with some exceptions.
But Terra,
But
for the most part, early on, is more of a vehicle to tell aspects of the story about the world of I forget what they're called, the world that her father is from, her Aeon father. It's not Aeon. I'm forgetting what the term is in game.
Esper.
Esper. Yeah, so like she's a vehicle for talking about that and the Empire invading that place, 20 years ago and separating her from her family, and then why is she have the ability of the Espers? So she's very good, like story focused character, but as a protagonist, things until like late into the World of Ruin just kind of happen to her, in my opinion. She doesn't like Locke and Edgar and even like Cyan and most of those three kind of engage and make decisions and drive the story forward for like 60% of the game. But anyways, don't want to go on.
If we're laying out recent laments about Terra in this podcast, then my recent lament about Terra is they've heavily nerfed her theatrhythm final bar line over Curtain Call, because in Curtain Call, Terra was one of the best characters in that game because they gave her trance in that game, and they didn't give her trance in final bar line. So she was heavily nerfed
back in this kind of scenario.
So that was a really, really, really good skill to have in that game. That's my recent Terra lament. If we're really laying it all out here on this podcast,
I have a curious question. If they did a best Tales of games for powered by the Western fans,
it would be Arise right now. I think Arise would be up on top because that's the recent one, and it was well received, and people seem to like it. I think Arise and
coin flip between Vesperia and Symphonia for a second, I think.
They did this not too long ago. It was before Arise, but I remember they split up the different regions of what was the favorite in each region.
Oh yeah.
March 2021. I remember that Tales of Zestiria was the most popular in Europe.
Europe,
what are you doing?
Because
there was the first one, one of the first that released day and date on PC.
Yeah,
and also had all the languages. So
and eFigs.
Yeah,
but Arise just also this
wasn't favorites. It was like sales. So
which translates to the favorites, obviously.
So not quite like a fan poll, but North America, Tales of Symphonia and Vesperia were 1 and 2, which makes sense. And then Europe, it's Zestiria and then Symphonia. So
if we ran a favorite Tales of series poll, would you include the mobile games or not in it?
No, you did not include that.
Because there's like 7 of them. 5 of them are dead.
Look, I can't wait for Tales of Cristoria and Luminaria to be the top 2. Okay, very well beloved by the Western audience, for sure.
I was thinking that I was going to say that Arise has sold better than the other ones, but it's at 2 million, which is about where like Vesperia is. Though I guess for Vesperia,
Vesperia had the advantage of re-release.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So I think Tales of Arise has sold the most in a single package.
It's probably going to be sold like the best, like moving forward too, in terms of like as time goes on. It'll probably overtake all the other Tales games in terms of like best selling. But I mean, like it's like generally speaking, I think a lot of people somewhat because of recency bias, like I think Arise would probably rank, if not first, very high on that.
But yeah, and then as for the Final Fantasy poll results, they're up on the site as the best Final Fantasy games revealed. That's one of Alex's like very Google friendly headlines, but it's the results of a poll held on our site. That's all it is. All right, we go into the news section. Most of these we've already touched on, at least the major things, though we did have one announcement of a new MMO. First of all, I say new. I don't know like if this MMO has already been like formally announced in a smaller context, but it's from NCSoft and Amazon, publishing Throne of Liberty, coming in North America, Europe, and Japan. It's a console-based MMO for PS5, Xbox Series, but also on PC. And we got a new announcement trailer for it, as well as a director preview. Though I took a look at this, Adam, and I know you're the one that put it up on.
Real quick, just small clarification. This is one of those games that was actually announced like a year ago. This is pretty common for these Korean MMORPGs where they get announced and then they kind of just go silent for a while because MMOs take a long time to make, and then they kind of re-reveal them. So, like, I think that announcement trailer that I linked in the post is actually from like last March or something,
okay,
a year ago. But in Amazon, so Amazon more recently, just in the last week, made the announcement that they were going to localize this, and not just for America and Europe, but also Japan. It didn't have any additional trailer or media or screenshots even, so I just grabbed what NCSoft had already released. Like, here's a trailer before. Amazon made this announcement. They didn't give any sort of date. They did say it's planned for consoles, PlayStation 5, Xbox Series, and PC. So all consoles, modern, next gen, modern gen consoles. But otherwise, we just know they're bringing it, but we don't have any like hard dates or details, pricing or anything like that.
No, thank you for the clarification, because I saw your 2 embedded YouTube links here in the news post, but I didn't check when their dates were. The thing about this is that I took a look at both the trailer and a little bit of the director's preview, and they look fine. They look interesting. They look vaguely generic Western high fantasy, but it's all action shots. Very little, if any, UI is shown or UX. It's all just cinematics and combo like video footage.
I think Chow and I are thinking the same exact thing when we see this story.
What's
Chow?
that?
Chow, you know what I'm thinking, right?
Yes.
It's a Korean MMO.
It's gonna be a disaster. All of them. A terrible experience with Ion. You know what
I
happened?
knew Chow was going to bring up Ion.
Adam was saying that didn't someone reply to the headline like Amazon and NCSoft keep it away?
It makes no
Yeah, someone quote tweeted our tweet about this with like the meme image of the kid with like the cross, like banishing evil. He's like Amazon and NCSoft.
You know what? They're not wrong. They're spitting.
Yeah, I would never touch MMO if it has a Korean associated with. Okay. No, it's kind of,
Sounds racist.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, I tell you what it's about.
Is that better?
Korean publisher.
Sensibilities.
Korean publisher.
All right,
I would never touch it again. You're just gonna get scammed from their pay to win model, and that would be the end.
Oh, Chow.
Spicy.
Such a way of words.
You didn't let me finish.
Well, so anyways, independent of who is publishing, whenever I see this, especially the fact that it doesn't have a date or a window, and now I'm learning after the fact that the footage that I am seeing wasn't even accompanying this Western and Japanese publishing announcement, I'm just like, okay, well, I'm sure I'll see this again in 5 years. I remember when Crimson Desert was announced as like a new console and PC based MMO, still haven't, it's gone dark. Blue Protocol obviously went dark for forever until it came back in the Game Awards last year. Ashes of Creation, I remember, was a game that I was interested in like 5 years ago, and it's still just doing like, it's churning away its alphas and betas, and I guess it's still developing, but I've kind of like lost interest because it's taken so long. So I'm like, all right, Throne and Liberty. We've got some footage up on the site from some of the from the initial announcement a year or so back, and maybe we'll see more about it. Who knows when we'll see more about it? Probably not this year, just based on the pace of what we've seen Amazon do with their other publishing deals. Who knows? I think all of the rest of these news posts are okay. We do have one sales update. As of the time of recording, I believe today is February 25th, the 1 year anniversary of Elden Ring. So let me double check that on my calendar just to make sure that I'm not stating that incorrectly.
That sounds right.
All right. And also this week we did get a sales update. Surprise, Elden Ring has continued to sell incredibly well. It has hit the 20 million unit mark. And I've seen plenty of people already compare this to, obviously, From Software's previously best-selling game, Dark Souls 3, took something like 4 or 5 years to reach the 10 million sales mark. I don't have the numbers exactly, but basically Elden Ring is easily From Software's fastest, highest best-selling game.
That's a lot of money to put into Armored Core 6.
Yeah, I had a buddy of mine before Elden Ring came out, where we kind of had like not an argument but a discussion about like, is like the Souls series like properly mainstream? And then like after like Elden Ring came out, we just came back to that argument and just like, yeah, no, definitely now.
Oh, it actually looks like I had it right. Yeah, Dark Souls 3, 10 million copies in about 4 years. Elden Ring, 20 million copies in 1 year. So that's what we're looking at.
Oh, it's looking good for when Armored Core 6 sells 20 million units in 6 months, and 19 million of them are a lot of angry people be like, what the fuck is this?
I still I know I brought it up when Armored Core 6 was announced, but I still like that tweet about, if you want to get into Armored Core, here's where you can play everything. And it's like, nothing on PC, nothing on a modern console. You better have a PS3 hooked up. That's the only way you're going to play anything.
I like the meme better, the one with Keeley, where he's like saying like the old Arcore was complete trash.
Oh yeah, I saw that one. That was good. That was good.
Wait, did he say
remember
that?
seeing that. I didn't actually fact check it. I didn't fact check if it was like an actual real article that Keeley wrote, but I could totally. I was willing to believe it. I don't know if
I think he was trashing on Armored Core 3, saying this is like it's like he was sick and tired of mech games, and now he's like hyping the new Armored Core is like the biggest, like the best thing since sliced bread or something.
To be honest,
That's
I
awesome.
never hear about Armored Core 3. Like Armored Core 2 had several different versions, which I know people like, and then Armored Core 4 and 4 Answer I know people like, but 3 I just like don't know.
3 is a weird entry for a lot of people because at the time like 3 came out, like there's already a lot of fatigue over like how often Armored Core games are being released.
I remember when I was in high school.
It's a good game, but
high school when like this was like in the middle, like just before the PS3 era, and there was like a million Armored
dating
Core
us,
games.
Adam.
Yeah, I know. But I remember we were just like Armored Core is this series that refuses to number itself sequentially because there's just like 7 different subtitles, and now we're finally at Armored Core 3. Like, okay,
yeah, like it's
the 9th game.
pretty much. Yeah, it's oh, I can't wait for them to show more of that whenever I need it. Fuck everyone else, I need it.
Okay, all the rest of these are all release dates. So I'm just going to go in these. I believe I've got them in chronological order. We have Meg's Monster is launching on March 2nd for Xbox One, Nintendo Switch, and PC.
I hope this is a good game.
You played the demo of this, right?
No, I reported on like the announcement of it, and like I got a good idea of like what kind of game it is, and it has a pretty interesting like concept of like your kind of main quote unquote RPG party member is like this little girl and this monster that's defending this girl, and this monster is basically invincible, but like you try to make sure that the girl behind you doesn't cry, because if she cries, like the world like explodes, and the monsters will try to like scare her and make her cry. So it's your job as the monster defending her to not make her cry. Pretty much. Interesting approach to battle systems, I guess.
And it's got a very Earthbound Mother-esque art style as well, which is always kind of fun. Also in March, we are getting Last Spell, which is releasing for PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Nintendo Switch, and PC. This is from Arcade Crew publisher. I don't know the developer, CCCP. Not sure if this is their debut title or not.
It says in the press release, developer Ishtar Games, and the actual thing.
Oh, okay. Maybe our game sidebar thing needs to be updated. But yeah, correct. It says Ishtar Games. This is a tactical RPG, so isometric, has a little bit of RTS sort of elements to it as well.
I think it's been out in early access for quite a bit now. Yeah, so I hear decent things about it.
Yeah, it's got 6,000 reviews since its early access release in 2021, sitting at 91% positive. So seems to be hopefully a success story for them so far, and we'll see if their 1.0 release ends up kind of bringing even a little bit more notoriety to their game.
I just double checked. The studio was called CCCP, and they renamed themselves to Ishtar.
Okay,
so both things were correct. It was probably CCCP when it was released in early access.
That's a weird like name change. I wonder what's like what's the reasoning and like why it had to be changed, and then like why Ishtar Games, I guess.
Ishtar is the goddess of something, right?
Oh yeah, it's a Russian goddess.
Best girl in Cross 2.
I thought you were going to say. I thought you were
saying and sexual love. So
there you go.
Everyone loves that.
Yes.
Remember, guys, Macross 2 is not canon.
I thought you were going to say best character like Yu-Gi-Oh or something, because I think there's a character named Ishtar in there as well.
Fairy Fencer F Refrain Chord is going to be releasing on April 25th in North America and Europe. This is obviously a re-release of Fairy Fencer F, which originally released.
No,
not quite a re-release.
Oh, not quite?
It's an entirely new game. It's like a tactical RPG. I believe the developer is Sting. Yeah, it's Sting. So unfortunately, that means I'm actually interested in playing it. So
it's okay.
I didn't realize that it wasn't actually on review sheets, so I'm adding it.
Sting released the thing that I cared about, which is Idra Union on PC. I think that'll be the Sting game that I play. I don't know if I don't know. Look, the only thing know about this game is that it's a strategy RPG now. 2, it dropped off the face of the earth as soon as it released in Japan, and no one ever talked about it. So I have no idea what is this game after, like, when it comes to like reception. I have no idea.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if there's anyone out there that could even say anything, because I remember when this release, it didn't even like hit the top 30 on its launch. And this is a Switch game.
Which is doing insane numbers in Japan still.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know how it is. I'm interested. I guess one neat thing about it is they also announced the limited edition. And normally I wouldn't say anything about that, because like companies like Idea Factory and NIS, obviously, they do limited editions for damn near everything. This is neat because one of the included things for the limited edition is actually a music book that is filled with actual sheet music, I'm assuming for piano, of some of the game's songs, which is that's like, cool. Hey, that's actually really like neat and probably like a cheaper thing to do, because it's like you just have to print the sheet music, and it's like it's a little like soft cover booklet. It's like, yeah, honestly, for any games that have like music as like a forefront, I think more companies should do that. That's actually really cool.
Hopefully it's like actually like a format in a way that's like very easy to use, like for pianists.
It looks like it's in the standard form factor that people use. Like I took like over a decade of piano lessons. I need to get a new keyboard, but yeah.
Also, one of these press release bullets is FFF Tactics ? Exclamation point.
I wonder if we're going for anything there. I think I did make a goof, because this next news bullet is a release date, but it's also an announcement. This is for a new game from Nippon Ichi. This is only currently announced for Japan. It is a supernatural school RPG called, and I hope it pronounces right, Xicatrice? Xicatrice,
probably.
Xicatrice, Xicatrice.
It's like a French word for something, so I audibly don't know how to pronounce
Xicatrice. So Xicatrice is a French word, sometimes used in English also as like a loan word. It's literally like, and you can see like almost immediately where like the metaphor comes from here. It's the healing tissue of skin over a scar is what it is. So why would you name a game that? So
I don't know. It sounds like a light novel title.
Well, clearly one of the themes of the game is that these characters are emotionally scarred and they are healing.
Yeah, so this is a supernatural school RPG set to release for PlayStation 4 and 5 and Switch on June 29th in Japan. But in this game specifically, it's from the point of view of a teacher of a class of students who have awakened their supernatural abilities. Talks about in the press release and the trailer for it, how students have a huge list of skills. You go through lesson plans with them. So it's kind of like, it's got a similar vibe and theme as a lot of games that we've seen, but that twist of the perspective of, almost like the Academy part of the Fire Emblem is what I initially think of when I look at this, about the lesson plan.
There's like a simulation element of sorts on here. They're like giving up like lesson plans to students. It's kind of like a lot of menu vomit, frankly, but I assume it makes sense when you're playing it.
If a student cannot face and overcome their emotional scars, they may be swallowed by their own power. If you fail to empathize with your students, it can end tragically. So, however, if you encounter a bad ending or achieve a certain condition, you may get a bonus to continue the game more favorably in a second playthrough. It's kind of interesting.
I don't know. Might be cool. I need to see it in action, I guess. I think the biggest disconnect I had was when I saw like this game's like artwork and characters, like, oh, that's cool. And then when I actually saw screenshots of like what the battle system looks like, it's like
it looks like a mobile game. I know that's almost disparaging, but that's
it's like a first person view, except like your characters have chibi models that take up like the four corners of a screen, and then like they kind of attack the monster through that view lens. It's very weird. I kind of need to see.
They look like casual lane models too.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to make of this. We find out who like the actual developer is, or is this just Nice?
It might just be Nice. I know they do some just kind of random development stuff.
Okay, I thought they were just publishing, or just they were developing too. Okay, yeah, I don't know. We okay? I guess. Who knows?
I mean, they're trying to find their next big thing besides Disgaea. So
the 7 students work in a group known as the Rout, Reserve Against Unusual Abnormalities Unit.
I wonder if that worked better in Japanese.
I'm gonna be honest, I didn't do that part in my write-up because I was just confused what that meant. I'm like, okay, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Yeah.
looking at the artwork, I think this is the same like team that did the Criminal Girls games.
Maybe
Just based off the user interface and whatnot, because it's like, oh, that looks similar. Never actually played those for obvious reasons, but I did see some screenshots back in the day. It's like, oh, that the way the party is laid out does remind me of it.
I'm kind of liking this monster design. It kind of reminds me of the monsters that we saw in Scarlet Nexus.
I was thinking too.
That's kind of fun. I don't know if I like the battle UI with the four corners and the chibi representation, but the monster concept art is pretty neat.
It's Xicatrice, all right?
Yeah, coming out in the summer in Japan, and I'm guessing we'll be able to see it. I think Adam always typically says that NIS America will localize this at some point. We just don't know.
The only games that NIS America seems to skip out on that are from like their parent company are some of like the visual novel type games. Usually anything else they'll get eventually, and they even do some of the novels, visual stuff. So
we talked very recently about the announcement of the Atelier Marie remake. It's actually kind of hard to say. Atelier Marie remake, The Alchemist of Solberg, now have a release date for it. This is going to release on July 13th for PlayStation 4 and 5, Switch, and PC. This is the remake that has the art style that a lot of people compare to like the Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl sort of chibi models. So this was only announced at the Nintendo Direct, earlier in the month, but now we got the release date of July 13th worldwide, including the PC day and date.
Yeah.
There's an interesting thing with this one that I should really follow up and clarification on. And Josh probably knows about the Japanese state of the game. So in the English special edition, let me look up the way they phrase it. This is phrased very poorly, I think.
I agree with you. I just reread it and I had to I'm still confused.
Sorry, give me a second.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. So they're detailing the special edition. Koei Tecmo also announced today that a special Atelier Marie Remake Alchemist of Solberg Digital Deluxe Edition will also be available at launch. This includes all the content in the DLC of the base game, along with Atelier Marie Plus content, an extra BGM pack, and the Another Look costume set. Like, wait a minute, zoom back in on that. Atelier Marie Plus content? What is that? And it seems like it might just be the original release of Atelier Marie Plus just as a bonus, and that game never released in English. So
yeah, I was only in Japan.
They're localizing an old PlayStation game for the first time that you can play it, the original version. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
If that's the case, I wouldn't just call it quote original Atelier Marie Plus content.
Like I would actually put that more into a focus and actually put out footage of that you're doing that, because that's actually also a big deal, Like that's weird. That's a weird footnote on that. Like even on the trailer that says it just shows digital deluxe edition and then just that the cover of that, and it's just like, what do you mean by this?
Now, I'm going to be honest. When they announced this stuff in Japan, I don't really pay attention to it because I know, okay, Koei Tecmo's going to announce it in the West in 12 hours.
Yeah.
Did they detail it anymore in Japan? Like it is just the original game.
That was the impression that I got. Like when they announced in Japan, I didn't actually really look forward, zoom into it and be like, "Hey, what?"
Now, obviously, the interesting part here is that this game was not ever officially released in English, so this would have to be a new translation.
It had to be localization of 2 games then, if this is the case.
Unless maybe the dialogue between the 2 games is literally 1-to-1, maybe.
Yeah,
so
I have no idea.
It's possible. I don't know. Maybe Gust has been better about retaining their older assets. Maybe they were able to. Maybe this remake is just straight up the same script. In which case, that might be why they're able to. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. But hey, you know what? Well, I hope it's just the original game preserved like that. That'd be very, very cool.
Yeah,
I would love to see that. Just that I would just be celebrating. Hey, old ass games that never got localized getting released on top of all the 2 the sequels to
we were just talking about Rhapsody.
Yeah.
It's just cool when these games are 20 years old or more, never got an official release, finally get a second chance. That's just cool, right? It's cool.
Right. More people should fucking do it. God damn it.
You know what? Hopefully this is a good port, because I would like nothing more than to the end of this like character arc of this entire like podcast where it's like, man, the industry needs to be better about PC ports and respecting their legacy. Gus coming out from the shadows, just being like, we can do both.
Okay, what if the Atelier Marie remake PC port, fine, no stutters, but the original version, the Atelier Marie PC, stutters everywhere.
And we just get the best of both worlds.
That way we could praise and complain about it at the same time.
That's right. Yeah.
But yep, it's coming out on July 13th worldwide. One thing we haven't talked about yet, this whole podcast, nearing the 3-hour mark, that there was a PlayStation State of Play this last week. However, there wasn't a lot to chew on from that event, especially for our site's purview, except for there's just one next news post, and that we got a launch date for Baldur's Gate 3. It is going to be coming out on August 31st for PlayStation 5 and PC. Obviously,
Yep.
it's been in early access, I think, since 2020 or 2021. It's been in early access for a while. I remember I actually played and put up a video on my early access playthrough of it. And then we already knew that it was slated for August. So this is just dialing in on August 31st. During the State of Play, there was also a release date reveal trailer, which is about 2 minutes of new footage and some gameplay. And then as a follow-up to this, obviously people are wondering, is this a Sony console exclusive then on PC and just on PlayStation? Well, actually, Arian did follow up and sent out a new press release talking about that they are or have been investigating an Xbox version. And I actually do kind of like how candidly this is stated. So I might just read this verbatim. Let's see. Thanks for all the hype and enthusiasm following yesterday's announcement of Baldur's Gate 3 coming to PS5. Xbox players, we've seen your questions about when and if you can expect Baldur's Gate 3 on Xbox. We've had an Xbox version of Baldur's Gate 3 in the works for some time, but I've run into some technical issues, particularly with split screen co-op. We are still working on an Xbox version of Baldur's Gate 3, but we're not yet confident enough to announce it. We don't like announcing anything until it's ready, and so on, and it goes on from there. We've reported this on the site if you want to see the full statement. So I do just like how candid that is. They're saying, nope, this isn't a publishing deal. We have the two versions of PC and the PlayStation 5 version we're confident in, and they're still hoping and working on an Xbox version as well.
Reading between the lines, it's kind of hard to see it as anything else than they don't want to say it, but we're having trouble getting split screen working on Series S.
I can see that, yeah, but
especially with like the reduced RAM, like that would be like especially an issue with like split screen, because it's like you're basically rendering the game twice. Yeah, it's at a lower resolution, but it's like, let's say you're in two entirely different parts of the map. It's like, oh, you have to render, like you have to load stuff into memory for two different areas, and it's like, oh no, suddenly that's a problem.
Yeah, the new trailer for Baldur's Gate 3 was like it looked really, really awesome in that State of Play. Like they showed off, the console interface for the first time there, and they showed off the split screen co-op in action, and just like straight up, hey, one of the players and one half of the split screen just be in a battle, and the other just randomly around the world, just like doing their own thing. It's actually like true split screen co-op in the sense that like you could just be doing two different things at two different places. You don't have to be like stuck together like in the same screen or same battle. It's like you could just do fuck off and just do your own thing, which is always fun.
That's like the perfect type of co-op, like co-op especially, but even split screen or even online. Just there are a lot of games where like you have to battle at the same time, you have to explore in the same zone or whatever, so you're kind of like tied together. Whereas do whatever you want, go in whatever direction. I know this is a very weird comparison, but I was actually playing the recent Lego game with my brother, and it's sort of similar that you can just be kind of off doing whatever you want in two different sections.
That's the one like all the Star Wars, right?
Yeah, the big Star Wars one. But just in general, just having like a co-op game where you can play together but kind of do your own thing is just like the perfect type of co-op.
Yeah, that's always a lot of fun. You just like, hey, check out what the fuck I'm doing. It's like you're being freaking crazy, dude. But yeah. Really excited now that it's getting out of early access. Full game is coming. It's looking very, very promising. I'm very excited.
It does have a little one of those like meme kind of edition tables where it's like there's the base game, the deluxe edition, and the collector's edition, and all that comes with, and all the different like in-game and all the in-game items that you get. Some of them are like based on Divinity items. And
yeah, a lot of it's like it seems like the rest of the stuff like just like it's non-essential. And like there's like you're not being locked out of like any like seems like gameplay content. It's like picking up the base game by itself. It doesn't seem like any of the additions like lock you out of like any gameplay stuff from what I saw or glanced at.
Yeah, so like there's some of these items are like Cape of the Red Prince, who is the lizard character from Divinity Original Sin 2. You get his cloak, you get Los's loot, you get Sybil's dagger, other things like that. Yeah. Man, if I had infinite time, I want to replay Original Sin 2. I love that game a lot, but it's like 120 hours long.
A long game. But it's finally got a date. Hell yeah, dude. Finally.
Mm-hmm. And I know that, we talk about this frequently when Baldur's Gate 3 come up in the news. It's been in early access for a while now, and they have been adding a ton to it, including like a bunch of new classes. Like I think when I first played it, I think there were 5 options, and I think there's like 8 or 9 now. And I'm curious, like basically there's certain people who already know exactly like how Act 1 plays out like to a T for that game. But hey, the early access has worked really well for Larian for both Divinity games, so I'm sure that they've got kind of like their cadence down to a science for the release.
Yeah, they've had the right mindset and the right like path to it. Like they've always kept the community in the loop and always being, and just what we saw right now with the Xbox, we're like always being very transparent with like just everyone as a whole. It's like, hey, this is what we're doing. This is like the issues that we're running into. This is the features that we're working on. It's their Larian Studios has always been just a very respectable developer in that sense. It's like just they have the right like approach to it all.
I do feel my last comment on this is that I did interview Sven Vink. I hope I pronounced that right. The last E3 before everything got shut down, and he was really excited for releasing this game on Stadia. So
let's go.
I wonder how much money they got for that.
So unfortunately, things happen.
I forget. Did they mention if the PlayStation 5 PC are crossplay or not? I didn't actually go check.
Hopefully they're cross save at least, because I know that Divinity Original Sin 2 is cross save between Switch and PC. Well, no, Switch and Steam very specifically. I know that I have it on GOG and no cross save there, unfortunately.
Yeah, I actually haven't checked if the.
Looking at the press release now, it doesn't seem to mention. It might have been mentioned in maybe some tweet or something, but the press release doesn't seem to mention it.
Okay.
I found an old article from 2020. This is on Game Rant. A new cross save feature, blah, blah, blah. This will let players transfer their save across Steam, GOG, and Google Stadia.
Okay.
Of course,
I think what's funny about the Xbox release is that the quote that people were bringing up when they were upset about this was Sven at one time said, "We're not playing the exclusivity game." And I just think the funny thing about that is that original quote was specifically for like Stadia. Like, no, we're not going to be exclusive to Stadia. We're not playing we're not playing the exclusivity game with Stadia. It's like, well, good.
I guess it's also one final mention just for PS5 players. If you pre-ordered the collector's editions, it includes a 72 hours early access of Act 1 on Baldur's Gate 3.
Every game does that these days. Like I know that like a Dragon Ishin had the same thing. I know like Sega does that a lot.
Yeah. Okay, Sega loves to do that. Like a Dragon Ishin is kind of weird because it's just pre-ordering. It was weird. It's pre-ordering. Yeah, it's pre-ordering the digital edition. Just even if it's like the base digital edition, before it went on sale, like before it was available, you could get early access to that. But once it became available during that early access period, then you had to purchase that digital deluxe during that early access period if you wanted to still go into that early access period, which is fucking stupid, but like okay, whatever. And then like they did the same thing with like SMT3 Nocturne, which is like very weird. It was like, hey, if you go purchase the super expensive edition of like this 20-year-old game or whatever, you can get to play it earlier. It's like, okay, it's been out. I don't know if you know, but it's been out. So yeah, and I don't know. I'm not really the biggest fan of the practice, but I admittedly have bought into the practice, like with DioField and Valkyrie Elysium as well, because it was because we didn't get like For Valkyrie releases, because we didn't get review code for that beforehand, so I did the early access to at least try to crank out the review ASAP for that. And DL Field was just because, I don't know, fucking DL Field.
And the very last headline I have here is this is a very small one. Caligula Effect Overdose is coming to PlayStation 5 at some point in 2023. I was talking to Adam about this before the podcast. It's already on PlayStation 4, so it's already playable on PlayStation 5, but this is just the announcement of a native PS5 version of the game.
Yeah, I think
is this an NES announcement?
Yeah.
It is? That makes sense. Because I know they've done that for a number of games now. Like, just recently did it for Labyrinth of Galleria, even though I don't think there's... Like, I think it was already 4K 60 if you played it on PS4 Pro.
yeah, they're doing this like they did this with East 8 and East 9. So, like, you know, I think they're just that's just kind of their next strategy is like, hey, to get additional source of like revenue.
Yeah,
Just, like,
and I do know that, like, and I mentioned them in the past, but like Annie Hawk on like Reset Era has mentioned, and he's like got insider information is all I'll say. But he says that the main idea is that releasing a game on PS5 ensures that they'll be like displayed more prominently in places like not just like GameStop, but like Best Buy and whatnot. So it's like, yes, you can play those games on like PS4 games on PS5, but eventually it's like, well, you want them to be in the PS5 section. So people that don't necessarily care about buying PS4 games, even if they can play them, are like exposed to those games like randomly, which I guess makes some sense.
I wonder how effective that strategy is in the long run. Like, I do wonder like how many additional sales they get out of that from that approach. Like, I'm not doubting them, of course. I'm just saying, like, I wonder how effective it is.
Like, you gotta wonder like how like I'm sure the APIs are similar enough between PS4 and PS5. Not to mention the architectures are basically like, with some exception, like almost the same. It's just stronger.
I want someone to test out putting one of these PS5 discs into a PS4. What happens? You know, are they?
They're native PS5 versions. They're native PS5 versions, so it won't work. But it's like I do want some like the exceptions out of nowhere. Just like someone just like some slips up, and it's like, oh, we're actually just repackaging the PS4 disc as a PS5. I don't know. Oh, weird, but hey, you know what? I guess this means eventually down the line we'll see Caligula 2 as a native PS5, release. Right? Did I get a PS5 release already or no?
Caligula 2?
So.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Let's take a look.
Like, I'm pretty sure it didn't. I can't keep up.
Doesn't look like it now.
Okay, so expect
The only thing is it came out to PC. It came to PC a little later.
Right, and then
that's not even from NAS America. That was just from Historia, the developer.
Yeah. Oh god, I was getting fucked up because the developer of Caligula Effect Overdose is Atelier, and I guess Historia is for Caligula.
Yeah, the Caligula games have different developers.
Oh god.
But they're both Furyu published in Japan and NAS America published in the West.
Where's Caligula 3 and or the Caligula 2 anime adaptation, I guess. That's the next phase of this Caligula progress.
And they make a Cold Steel 4 anime.
I mean, that's already airing. It's already a Cold Steel anime, but it's not.
That's not 4.
I think it's not Cold Steel 4.
Chow wants 4 specifically.
I don't know why you want 4 so badly, Chow. Go finish your Cold Steel 4 guide.
So I can deal with this curse in real life.
Yeah, Chow, you need to finish your Cold Steel 4 guide.
Well, he's working on his Azure guide.
Well, yeah, but you only have so much time before you have to start working on the Reverie guide. You gotta go quick.
It's after you finish the Bravely Default 2 guide, by the way.
No. Looking at my Azure guide, I'm like, how the hell did I even write this? It's so fucking long.
Around the corner, dude. It's next month.
What's next month? Oh, Azure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was thinking Hajimari. Well, and that covers us for this episode of the podcast. Now that we're into the third hour, or right at the third hour. So not a lot of news, but we got a lot of good discussion out of both new games like Octopath Traveler 2 and Redemption Reapers, and then apparently a pretty long, interesting discussion about the state of PC ports, or even just like Switch ports for surprising new patches and games.
State of video games.
Yeah. I like that. The state of video games. Yeah, so all those features that we talked about are up on the site. The major ones, including the Final Fantasy poll results, the Octopath Traveler 2 review, the Labyrinth of Galleria review, James's Atelier Ryza 3 preview are all up on the site, as well as all the news and the updated release dates are all incorporated into the RPGs of 2023 calendar that Adam does a really good job of keeping up to date. You can find RPG Site on all the social media platforms. You can find us by just searching for RPG Site on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. You can join our Discord by hitting the link at the top of our homepage, going to discord.gg/RPG Site, or I believe the link should be below most all of our recent video uploads on YouTube for our Tetracast podcast as well. And we'll be back next week. It'll be our first podcast in the month of March already. And I forget, is Wolong releasing before that date, or does it come out right after? Let's see. So that'll be March 4th.
Wolong comes out on March 3rd.
All right. So maybe we'll be able to talk about Wolong next week. We'll see if that comes to be. But until you hear from us next time, stay safe and take care. We'll talk to you guys later.
I'm longing.